Chapter 80. I was almost killed by the explosion just now. Gong Yimo's voice trembled. I'm the only one who knows about this thing. It's extremely powerful, and if it's used in a war, it will definitely cause great suffering. She straightened her body and looked at the crowd, her eyes filled with determination and sadness. Once it falls into the hands of the emperor, he will experience the pleasure of killing people in an instant. With all the emperor's thoughts of annexing the world, they will definitely start a war. It's fine if it's used to bomb others, but the composition of this thing is not complicated. What if someone else develops it and bombs them? What if it's used in the struggle for power among the princes? Think about its power. Whether it's mountains, rivers, or fertile fields, they will all turn into ruins in an instant. Once the situation is irreversible, people will go crazy and not care about the consequences. When the time comes, several groups of people will kill each other and cause thousands of innocent people to lose their lives. The common people will become homeless and destitute. Then I will be the sinner of history. As she spoke, she knelt on the ground. The sorrow in her eyes was moving. She seemed to have already seen the tragedy of blood flowing like a river. She held a sharp weapon in her hand, but her heart was only doing good deeds to benefit the people. A woman who cared about the world so much was kneeling in front of them in a sorry state after escaping from death. It really made them feel ashamed. Gong Che was definitely disappointed. As the crown prince, he definitely hoped that such a weapon could be used by his country. However, every word of Gong Yimo's words struck his heart. He couldn't bear to see the country destroyed, and he didn't want to do anything against her wishes. Therefore, he would rather not see this thing. In her previous life, it was because she didn't control the situation well that war broke out everywhere and caused great suffering. Gong Yimo originally invented the bomb for mining. However, because the bomb's composition was leaked, it fell into the hands of the emperor. Coincidentally, Liu Yi came to invade, and the emperor easily won the war with the bomb. However, the good times did not last long. Gong Cheng, who had tasted the sweetness of success, was not satisfied with the status quo. He wanted to continue north. However, a fire broke out in his backyard, and the princes began to riot. In just a few years, rockets, artillery, and thunder sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. The Daiyu state completely collapsed. The four princes with real power each occupied their own territories and fought fiercely. Due to the loss of control, Gong Yimo and Gong Che had to guard the imperial city. They had no choice but to use violence to curb violence. A 5-year civil war broke out. Gong Che guarded the imperial court, while she waved her saber, causing rivers of blood to flow. She had become a veritable executioner. That was why she didn't want to recall her past life. That was why she could forgive Gong Che and Gong Dai so easily. This was because she subconsciously believed that she deserved to be tortured and killed. After all, those who were affected by the war could be said to have died in her hands. She had committed a grave sin. The greatest power of a superior was not to punish, but to forgive. That was why in this life, she could only forgive everyone before forgiving herself. In the end, she succeeded. It took her 5 years to clean up the mess caused by the bomb. Other countries took the opportunity to invade, and the Daiyu state pursued them. They used weapons that were ahead of their time to annex the 3 countries and unify the Central Plains. However, at that time, the country was full of corpses who knew how many years it would take to recover. She became the empress as she wished. She was already in her 30s, and her best years were spent killing people. It was no wonder that others took advantage of her weakness. However, she also hated it. She did invent the bomb, but was all of this really her fault? Her original intention was to do a good deed. If it weren't for those men's ambitions and the uncontrollable civil war, the situation wouldn't have gotten so out of hand. And all of these riots were suppressed by her bit by bit. She spent 10 years pacifying this great war in the Central Plains, but not a single person thought of her good. It was all because she was the one who brought the bad karma to this world. After the war stopped, she gave up her power because she was tired of it. Gong Dai and Gong Che directly took over her power, which led to the tragedy that happened later. However, this time, she wouldn't make the same mistake again. She believed that she had the ability to protect this thing. Even if there were people who were jealous, it wouldn't be easy for them to improve the bomb to her current level. The use of an item depended on the person who used it. If it was used to kill people, it would be a tool for killing people. If it was used for development, it would be a cure for the world. In her previous life, the bomb had brought tragedy to the people. However, in this life, she wanted to use it to benefit the world. Therefore, she said, this thing in my hand can not only be used to build canals, it can also be used to open mines and build roads. There are countless uses for it. It can not only be used to kill people. There will be a day when the morals and development of the people reach the standard, and this thing will naturally appear. Now that it has been taken away, it can only be used to kill people. Do you want to see that kind of scene? With a shout, her sharp eyes swept across the crowd. Answer my question. The son of the Minister of Revenue, Li Ku, the son of Duke Yong, Qin Qing, the grandson of the Minister of Justice, Yu Ziqing, and the grandson of Marquis Yongqing, Su Yuan. Will you report this matter back to your families? She called out their names one by one, and every time she mentioned a person, that person would tremble. They were all of noble status, but they felt an unprecedented fear towards Gong Yimo. This kind of feeling was something they didn't even feel when facing the emperor. They never thought that they would be afraid of a person. After all, they were little overlords who could call the wind and summon the rain in the capital. However, at this moment, when they were called out by her cold tone, their hearts subconsciously shrank, and they also felt a sense of guilt. Once this thing was known by the world, the pressure that Gong Yimo would face could be imagined. But even so, for the sake of building canals, she still took out this thing and was prepared to bear all the consequences. She was that confident, that kind of courageous, and wholeheartedly wanted to do good, to turn a killing weapon into a sharp tool for development. A woman was able to bend and stretch to this extent for the sake of the world. If they really did expose this secret, what kind of brotherhood would they have left? Su Yuan was the first to agree. Princess, don't worry. Even if the emperor finds out, it definitely won't be me, Su Yuan, who exposed this secret. The little fatty felt a little heartache. We all agree. Princess, quickly get up. You just walked in the water. Gong Yimo's heart softened, but she still didn't move. She only raised her head to look at Gong Che. Gong Che helplessly and dotingly helped her up. As long as it is what you say, Crown Prince Gij, I will support it. This was considered an agreement. Gong Yimo once again revealed a smile. Everyone, don't worry. I will think of a way to conceal this along the way. With this treasure, we can expect to open the canals in 2 years. At that time, if the emperor is angry because of this, the law can't punish the masses. I will do my best to protect all of you, and this treasure will also be my bargaining chip. She said it in such high spirits, as if she would bear the consequences herself. She was clearly younger than them, but she was so responsible. They couldn't help but dotingly look at the little girl. If such a day really came, they would definitely bear the consequences together. Otherwise, how could they be considered friends? Chapter 81. The next day, the sun was shining brightly. Many of the farmers who had applied for the job carried their tools to the riverbank. They were all dressed in burlap and looked very strong. Why do we have to widen the river? It's not like we don't have enough water in Star City. A man complained. If it weren't for the money and the fact that the farming season was about to start, he would have stayed at home to rest. Another villager said, anyway, they're paying us 20 copper coins for half a day. Where else can you find such a good deal? If you don't want to do it, there are plenty of people lining up to do it. They chatted in twos and threes and soon, a large group of people had gathered by the riverbank. They all walked towards the Vidra Bay, which was the first blockage downstream of the Yulong Inner Canal. When they passed by the place Gong Yimo blew up yesterday, someone exclaimed, "Huh! Wasn't there a small hill in the middle of the river? Why isn't there any more?" The person beside him glanced at him. "You must have remembered wrongly. There's nothing here." The person from before took a look and continued to walk forward. As he walked, he mumbled in confusion, "I clearly remember there was a small hill in the past. The Vidra Bay was a narrow shoal at the end of the Yulong Inner Canal. There were hills on both sides and between the hills, there was only a small opening for the river. However, the opening was blocked by a huge rock that fell from the hills. Therefore, not only did it have to be widened, it also had to be cleaned up. The water here wasn't deep so they could dig in. However, when the crowd looked up and saw the hills that extended out from both sides of the Vidra Bay, they heard that they had to widen the area by more than 10 meters. How long would it take to dig? Only about 10,000 people came today because of the small Vidra Bay. Gong Yimo thought that 10,000 people would be enough for a day. No, there was still more. However, she called so many people here today for a small publicity campaign. Gong Che only stepped forward when he saw that everyone had gradually gathered and occupied the flat land by the river. Today was their first day of groundbreaking, so there would be a small-scale sacrificial ceremony. Therefore, Gong Che wore a pure white robe. At this moment, he was standing on top of the temporary altar and looking down with a gentle expression. He was handsome, just like a god. Although they didn't have to worry about food and clothing, their horizons were limited after all. This was the first time they had seen such a beautiful person. It was as if a storyteller had boasted about it. No wonder he was the crown prince. He was the son of the emperor, and also the emperor. Therefore, everyone prostrated themselves and shouted, "Greetings, Your Highness." The crown prince smiled. No need for formalities. Only then did everyone help each other up. However, they were no longer as lazy as before. Instead, they became cautious. When they saw the crown prince, they felt a sense of reverence for the imperial power. Behind the crown prince was a black mass of imperial guards protecting him. This made these migrant workers feel afraid. If they didn't work hard later, wouldn't they be beaten by them? If it was too complicated, these people wouldn't understand, so Gong Che just said a few simple words. "I've been ordered to dig the canal. Starting from the end of the Jade Dragon Inner Canal, you have to complete the task of widening and clearing the river around Star City within a month. A total of 80,000 people. Do you remember?" His words made the migrant workers on the scene a little angry. Didn't they agree that 80,000 people would take turns? 40,000 people would take turns in the morning and 40,000 people would take turns in the afternoon. However, the excavation in Star City stretched for more than a dozen miles, and there were more than a dozen places like Hookah Bay. Even if they dug for an entire day, they wouldn't be able to complete it in a month. At this moment, although someone was afraid, he couldn't help but ask. Gong Che looked at the group of people below looking at him. They were either afraid or angry. He couldn't help but smile and pointed at Hookah Bay not far away. "How long do you think it would take for 10,000 people to dig this Hookah Bay to be as wide as the other parts of the river?" Everyone looked at the mountains on both sides of the Hookah Bay. There were trees growing on them and they extended out. To dig like this, they would have to dig at least 10 meters. It would take at least half a month to complete it. Someone shouted, I'm afraid it would take half a month. Gong Che smiled again. Why? The person who was pointed out was a little afraid. However, under Gong Che's encouraging gaze, he said fearfully, this mountain has been around for a long time. There are also evergreen trees growing here. The roots of the trees are intertwined and it's difficult to dig. That's why I said it would take half a month. However, just as he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. Following that, the ground shook and the mountain shook. The left side of Hoku Bay suddenly collapsed. It was as if something had jumped out from the mountain. Countless boulders were thrown more than 10 meters high. Such a scene was as if the mountain was collapsing. The original Hoku Bay seemed to have opened up a hole. The river water that was originally blocked surged up, sweeping up sand and mud with a momentum that could swallow mountains and rivers. It came rolling in. The mountain god is angry. It was unknown who shouted this, but all the farmers knelt down. They kept kowtowing. The mountain god was angry and the earth dragon was overturning. It just had to happen on the first day of work. This was a warning from the heavens. At this moment, a pleasant laughter was heard. A little girl suddenly descended from the sky. She was wearing a white gauze dress. Her skin was fairer than snow. At a glance, she really looked like a fairy child. Everyone could not help but look up at her. They forgot to kowtow. The main thing was that her appearance was too strange. The mountain god was angry. Not only did she appear at this time, she even laughed. It made people think that this little girl was dangerous and mysterious. Gong Yimo laughed with her hands on her hips. She pointed at the half-blown Hoku Bay and said, Now, tell me. How long would it take to clear all these rubble? No one dared to answer. They all lowered their heads, afraid that she would point them out. The timing of her appearance was too eye-catching. It brought fear and pressure to the people for no reason. They did not dare to answer her. Meanwhile, some people looked at the Hoku Bay and pondered. Although clearing the rubble was also a big project, it was not as laborious as digging. If the other half of the Hoku Bay was also cracked, 10,000 of them would probably be able to clear it in 1 or 2 days. However, they only thought about it. They did not dare to say a word. Everyone, raise your heads. Gong Emo suddenly shouted. This time, everyone couldn't help but timidly raise their heads. Each and every one of the big and tall men was inexplicably afraid of the little girl in front of them. Gong Emo grinned. You don't have to panic. The mountain god was not angry just now. It was the power of my palm. Liar. Although no one dared to refute, many people had the same thought. How could the scene of heaven and earth collapsing just now be caused by a little girl? Seeing that they did not believe her, Gong Yimo was not angry. She only raised her eyebrows calmly. In that case, open your eyes wide and watch how I destroyed the right wall of Hoku Bay. Don't blink. Chapter 82. She looked up to the sky and laughed. Suddenly, she flew up. Her qigong was very good. In a few moments, she had flown to the left side of the mouth of the pot. Looking at the mouth of the mountain opposite her, she suddenly threw out a palm. That palm seemed to have substance. Even they were affected by it from afar. It was obvious that it was very powerful. The loud noise from before was heard once again. And this time, it was even more earth-shattering than the previous one. The entire right side of the mountain that was leaning forward was blown apart and fell straight into the river. Although it was different from the dust that filled the sky just now, the power that could move mountains and fill the sea with a flick of a finger stunned everyone who saw it. It really didn't even take a blink of an eye. They had not recovered from the previous explosion. Witnessing this scene again with their own eyes, everyone's hearts trembled. They almost wanted to bow down and worship her. Impossible. How could there be such a powerful person in this world? Those who were more knowledgeable had heard that if one's martial arts reached a certain level, one could hit a cow across a mountain. However, they had never heard of anyone who could break a mountain with one palm. This was definitely not a mortal, but a deity. Everyone involuntarily kowtowed in the direction of Gong Yimo. Their expressions were extremely pious. For things that they had never seen or could not explain, they easily blamed it on the deities. And all of this was within Gong Yimo's expectations. She looked up to the sky and laughed 3 times. Her voice contained internal energy and spread far and wide. Then, with a light tap of her toes, she once again flew to the ground and landed directly on the simple altar. Gong Che looked at her with a smile, while Gong Yimo's face was filled with arrogance. She raised her arm and shouted, "I am the personal disciple of the 13th generation sect leader of Mount Yunding. My strength has reached perfection. I can shake mountains and break rivers. Today, I am under the mandate of the heavens to help the Crown Prince build the canal. Once the canal is built, Dayu State will no longer have drought and floods. Every place will have a bountiful harvest and it will be prosperous every year. For such a grand undertaking, all of you will be meritorious. So, are you willing to help me?" Her voice was transmitted with internal energy. Every word seemed to knock on the tip of people's hearts. It made people unable to think of resisting. Moreover, such a legendary immortal was helping the Crown Prince to build the canal. It was obvious that he was under the command of the heavens. Besides, the construction of the canal was also done to prevent natural disasters. Their star city also often flood control. How could they not be willing to do such a good thing for the country and the people? Blood rushed to their heads as they shouted in unison. "I am willing to serve the Crown Prince." Gong Che couldn't help but laugh. "Very good." Next, he turned to face the sky. Su Yuan hurriedly served 3 cups of wine that he had prepared. Gong Che raised 1 cup to toast the heavens, another to toast the earth, and finally, he raised the last cup from afar and shouted, "I have been ordered by the Emperor to build the canal. Today is a good day to move the earth, I pray here." He only hoped that there would be no more natural disasters in Dayu State. "Report to the higher authorities. The heavenly opening Grand Canal will be opened today." After saying that, he downed the cup in 1 gulp. Behind him, the tens of thousands of people cheered loudly. The sacrificial ceremony had been completed. The construction of the Grand Canal was in full swing. During this period, many people heard that there was a strange person by the Crown Prince's side who could move mountains and fill seas with a wave of his hand. For a time, it became a legend, and everyone wanted to see for themselves. Not only that, this person was quick-witted and made many practical suggestions. It was because of this person that the construction of the canal progressed at a rapid pace. Some people even calculated that if they didn't care about the cost, the Grand Canal's main road to Tianting would be completed in less than 3 years. As a result, many people were anxious. Letters from the capital were sent to Star City like snowflakes. Su Yuan and the others held the letter in a dilemma. Gong Emo, on the other hand, didn't look at it again after reading the first letter. Big U had so many people. As long as they had sufficient financial resources, and with her help, 3 years. Building a main road. She felt that it was too long. Gong Yimo crumpled the letter into a ball and looked at the farmers working in full swing outside. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Under Gong Yimo's advocacy, the farmers who applied for the job this time were treated very well. They were different from the previous officials who didn't treat people as humans when they were building the palace and paving the road. Therefore, Gong Yimo's actions received the gratitude of many people. Most of the ancient people were simple and honest. When they decided to do something, they would do their best to do it. They weren't like the people in the capital who liked to play tricks and trip people up when they saw a little benefit. Not thinking about those troublesome people, Gong Yimo was more concerned about how to reduce the workload of the workers. They were currently cleaning the first section of the Yulong Inner Canal north of the Yangtze River. The riverbed here was too high, and the water wasn't deep. The flow was also very slow. However, the cleaning process was very laborious. Most of the tools now were made of wood. The most difficult thing to do was to clean up the silt and sand in the river. They could only use the most primitive method, which was to dig and transport. Although the water was shallow and only as high as a person's calf, this method of digging in the water was too laborious. Countless ideas appeared in Gong Yimo's mind, but she rejected them all in the end. If only there was no water. This idea made Gong Yimo's eyes light up. She immediately gathered the geomasters, sailors, and craftsmen who were accompanying her. She also called the others to discuss her idea. The group of people went under a simple pergola. There was only a table without chairs. On the table was a model of the road that Gong Yimo had made using mud. Everyone gathered around the table. They didn't know what idea this young lady, who was rumored to be a god, had come up with. Does anyone have any ideas about cleaning up the inner canal? Feel free to suggest anything. Gong Yimo smiled. Perhaps they had better suggestions? However, everyone only shook their heads. Only the craftsman stroked his beard and said, "We've already made the ox plow and nail rake that Miss mentioned previously. We've also made some other labor-saving tools based on Mrs. Wheel and Axle method. Perhaps they'll be useful. Miss, you can go take a look later." Gong Yimo nodded. The ancients were very smart. Perhaps it was due to the limited materials, but they knew how to make the best use of things. After diligent research, they also knew how to draw inferences from one example. Let's not talk about the tools first. I have an idea now. Let's see if everyone agrees. Gong Che nodded, indicating that there was no harm in her speaking. Gong Yimo smiled and pointed at their current position. The Yulong Grand Canal's riverbed is too high, so it's heavily congested. The water in the river only flows slowly along the slope. However, it's too troublesome to work in the water because of the height of a person's leg. Then what do you mean? Li Ku was very curious. What kind of fantastic idea did this princess have again? Gong Yimo smiled proudly. She took out a brush, dipped it in ink, and drew dotted lines on a map that extended all the way to the capital. Her eyes lit up slightly as she pointed at the dotted lines and said, "Now, we can split into several sections to repair the canal. We'll repair small sections at a time. When the excavation or cleaning is almost done, we'll open up the connecting sections. What do you all think?" Chapter 83. Wonderful. This will speed up the construction process, someone immediately praised. At this time, the water commissioner said, "This method is fast, but there's still water in the river, so we still have to dig underwater." Stupid. Little Fatty Ching Ching suddenly said, "Since we're digging in sections, we definitely have to cut off the flow. But this water, how can we block it?" Everyone couldn't help but look at Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo smiled and pointed at a spot on the model. "Since we can't block it, why don't we change its course?" "Change its course?" someone exclaimed. In fact, people in this era had a natural reverence for nature. They would feel uneasy and blasphemous if they were asked to block a river. Change its course. This was beyond the reach of human strength. They didn't even dare to think about it. Everyone, please take a look. The Yulong Internal Canal runs from the Huai River to the Yangtze River. Where does the water come from? The Huanglong flows into the Bian River, then into the Huai River. From there, the Huai River enters Yulong. However, if we change its course at the Bian River and make it flow to Luoyang, then the Huaiyang section will be empty. The Yulong internal canal's slope decreases from north to south. The water flows downhill. Even if we block one section, there's another section. For example, the Huai River's water flows into Hongzhe Lake, and Hongzhe Lake's water flows into Yulong. This section also needs to be changed. We can divert the Hongzhe Lake's water to Sanhe and Su Canal, and then let them flow into the Yangtze River. This way, the middle and lower sections of Yulong will be empty, and so on. Gong Yimo took a deep breath and looked at the craftsmen and youths who were rubbing their hands in glee. They couldn't wait to give it a try. Ideas are thought of by people. In history, Yu the Great also chose to divert the water instead of blocking it. If we use the water well, how can it not benefit the people? We can divert the water inland as we dig. You must know that the further west we go, the harder it is to get water. However, if we can spread the water inland, whether it's for irrigation or for preventing natural disasters, it'll be a great achievement. Everyone here will go down in history. Her words were very inspiring. At this moment, she lowered her head slightly and gestured towards the Crown Prince. There's no time to lose. Next, Brother Crown Prince will issue the transfer order. Gong Che was deep in thought. Then, after a round of discussion, he gave the order. Su Yuan. Bring Master Teacher Li, Master Teacher Lu, and the others to the Huai River to cut off the water flow and change its course. Head north to build a new canal. I will hand over the Crown Prince's transfer order to you, so don't disappoint me. Understood. Su Yuan's expression turned solemn. He replied loudly. The forces behind Su Yuan and Yu Ziqing were neutral, while Qin Qing belonged to the Democratic Party. Only Li Ke's identity was somewhat awkward. But it didn't matter, because the Crown Prince also had many trusted aides who would supervise them. Ziqing, bring Master Qin and Surveyor Jiang to Hongzhe Lake to intercept the water and change its course. Starting from Hongzhe Lake, you will clean up the river in sections to the south. When this section is complete, you will patrol the embankment from the south to the north. Until we meet up with them. As for the heavily congested main road in the middle, Gong Yimo, come with me. Gong Yimo smiled. Understood. As for the task of digging the tributary inland, Qin Qing, Li Ku, I will leave it to you too. The two of them acknowledged. In this way, everyone was separated, but there was no sadness in their hearts at all. There was only the determination to do great things. They were all born noble, and that kind of ambition to achieve great things was passed down in their bones and blood. Although they were still a little afraid now, if they couldn't complete such a simple task, they might as well just stay in the capital and wait for death. While all of this was going on, Gong Yimo's life became more fulfilling. During the day, she helped the farmers build the canal. Not only did she wave her hands, but she also dug with them. She was always covered in dirt and dirty, and soon, she blended in with the others. As for these uncouth men, when they saw that Gong Yimo, a girl who was the same age as them, knew so many things, they revered her and felt closer to her. When they worked, they put in more effort. Gong Yimo also personally helped them modify many things. After all, she had the experience of 3 lifetimes and had seen so much. Many farming tools were brought over for Gong Yimo to take a look and explain their use. Gong Yimo was always able to find ways to improve them, benefiting many of the villagers. For a while, there was a wave of praise. As for Gong Che, he was never harsh on the workers and was very considerate of them. They only worked half a day, and for those who were especially poor, he even allowed their wives and children to come to the camp to help cook. Therefore, the entire construction site was in full swing. The shouts of the people, the cries of the cows and horses, and the gentle voices of the women with cloth wrapped around their heads as they delivered food to the people formed a lively symphony. The children ran in between. They were very curious about Gong Yimo and often looked at her. On this day, Gong Yimo was testing the pulley at the craftsman's place. She wanted to make a pulley that rotated 360 degrees like the luggage in the future. This way, when the workers moved the soil, it would be much easier. A group of children hid behind a tree and looked at the work shed. They looked like they wanted to come closer but did not dare to. Gong Yimo looked at them and grinned. She walked over. "Children, what are you doing here?" She was like a mountain king as she asked with an evil smile. Usually, Gong Yimo would tell them stories when she had nothing to do. She did not expect that they would come to her today to pass on a message. "Big sister, a young master asked me to pass on a message to you." Gong Yimo forced them to call her big sister, and the one who said this was a little boy who looked very smart. "Oh. What message?" He said, "Tonight at midnight, we will talk." Gong Yimo rubbed her chin, then glared at Gong Yi. "Big sister, you need to get down to business. This matter is not allowed to be leaked. Do you understand?" The few children nodded. Gong Yimo smiled and took out a bunch of candies to send them away. She put one in her mouth and hummed a song as she walked back. The moon was above the clouds. A man stood alone on a high ground, overlooking the entire construction site. At this time, there were no workers at the site. There was only a patrol team that walked by from time to time and a circle of torches shining on the potholed wetland. "How is it? Are you surprised?" Gong Yimo had unknowingly stood behind him. Kim Yoon looked at her in surprise. "How did you know I would be here?" Gong Yimo stood beside him and looked down at the site. "Because this is the only place where you can see the entire site." She could not help but look down and exclaimed, "Sometimes, we think that the changes of nature are very magical. But now, I feel that it is also a very shocking thing to see people change nature bit by bit." The meaning in her words made Kim Yoon ponder deeply. Suddenly, he thought of something and winked at her. "Then why don't you guess why I came to look for you?" Gong Yimo smiled. "Now that we are digging in full swing, you are also doing it in secret. This smuggling, other than having water, you also need boats, right?" Kim Yoon sighed and shook his head. "Fortunately, you are not a man, otherwise," Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Otherwise, you will give yourself to me." Chapter 84. Her words made Kim Yoon glare at her. The mole under his eye made his eyes look like they were covered in mist. It was hard to imagine that such a person would become so cold and indifferent, like a killing machine. But in this life, she would not let him become like that again. "Don't give me that. Let me ask you. I haven't been here for a while, how did you cultivate so quickly? Also, you've been rumored to be a god. It's said that you have the ability to break mountains and rivers." At this point, he could not help but laugh. "With your small body. You'd better save your breath if you want to dig out my secrets." In the beginning, Gong Yimo had shown off a few times in a high-profile manner to intimidate the people. The next time Gong Yimo used her underwear was at night. So she changed the topic. "Back to the topic. What do you think about ships?" Kim Yoon said, "I have a few ships in my hands, but if I want to make it big, it's far from enough. So this time, I've taken over a small shipyard by Hongzhou Lake. I think it will be useful." He was really thoughtful. Of all places, it had to be Hongzhou Lake. Gong Yimo shook her head. "Those ships. I've seen them before. They're exquisite and beautiful. The joints are comparable to works of art. But these ships are not the ships I want. Kim Yoon raised his eyebrows slightly. Daewoo State's shipbuilding technology is the best in the 4 countries. Then what about the world? Are those countries that live on the islands really the best? Realizing that she had strayed off topic, Gong Yimo laughed. What I'm not satisfied with is that they're building too slowly. A large ship and a medium-sized shipyard still need 3 months. When my canal opens, I wonder how many ships they'll have built. This problem was not something that an investor like Kim Yoon could come up with a solution. He handed something to Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo took it and looked at it. It was the shipyard's contract. Jin Yoon smiled and said, thinking about it, I can't take advantage of you for nothing. Just take this factory contract as a sign of my sincerity in cooperating with you. His smile was extremely moving. He was already 17 years old and had yet to fully mature. However, if nothing unexpected happened, he would definitely be devastatingly beautiful in the future. Gong Yimo accepted it with a smile. You didn't come here today just for this, did you? Of course not. Kim Yoon raised his eyebrows proudly. I know you care a lot about that kid in the Western continent. I have some news here. Do you want to know? Gong Yimo's expression suddenly turned serious. Tell me about it. At this time, Kim Yoon also put away his charming smile, and his expression became more serious. This is just my guess. In Yuheng, there are treacherous officials in power. The emperor is also old, and has become more and more muddle-headed recently. Some time ago, Lu Yi secretly came to visit. I'm guessing that their purpose in coming here is not simple. Thinking of the western continent that bordered Lu Yi, Gong Yimo pondered for a moment. Suddenly, she smiled. There's no hurry. Even if there is a war, it will be a matter of 1 or 2 years later. At this time, it was very troublesome for people to go to war. The preparations before the war took a long time. By that time, she would have already called Gong Dai over to clean up the Grand Canal. As for who to send to war, what did it have to do with her? Gong Yimo's words made Kim Yoon sigh slightly. He was definitely not worried about Gong Dai. He was afraid that the emperor would really do something unwise and cause the people of Yuheng to suffer, although that was what she thought. When she replied to Gong Dai's letter, Gong Yimo still told Gong Dai the news and asked him to be more careful. On Gong Dai's side, it was also in full swing. The weather was hot and the wind was strong, but the people were very enthusiastic about digging the wells and canals. Their thinking was very simple. If this matter was done well, it would benefit their children and grandchildren. When he received Gong Yimo's letter, Gong Dai hurriedly put down all the matters at hand. He sat under a tree and carefully read it. It was only a few lines, but he read it very seriously. He seemed to be able to imagine Gong Yimo's appearance when she was writing and biting the tip of her pen because she didn't know what to write. A few children were playing and chasing from afar. Some of them were not young anymore, but they only dared to secretly size up Gong Dai. The weather was too stuffy. Their clothes were all soaked with sweat. Gong Dai's clothes were dry and refreshing. Although he was also wearing coarse hemp clothes, he was different from them. Even though he was casually sitting under the tree, he still looked so noble and elegant. It made people exclaim that he was a refreshing and handsome young immortal. At this moment, Gong Dai smiled faintly as he saw something. In the eyes of the peeping children, it was even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. Gong Dai had always known that his royal sister was not a friendly person. If you didn't look for her, she would never look for you. Until you met, she would treat it as if it didn't exist. Just like in the past, she wasn't someone who liked to talk about her plans and prospects for the future. She always felt that people should speak with facts. But he was different. Royal sister would care about his feelings. For example, if she were to reply to someone else, she would probably only say, "I'm fine. Don't miss me." He couldn't help but laugh. At this moment, a couple saw Gong Dai and quickly came over to greet him. Gong Dai smiled gently and helped them up. "There's no need to be so formal. I just came out to take a look." But the middle-aged man smiled and said, "Thank you for your kindness, sir. If sir hadn't arrived in time, we don't know if we could have survived that epidemic." Gong Dai smiled even more modestly. "This is what I should do." After he finished, the couple thanked him again and finally left holding hands. The woman was still praising him. "This little sir not only has a good heart, but he also looks like a fairy child." And this scene was seen by Bai Xing, who came to find Gong Dai, and he felt a chill down his spine. Originally, His Highness knew that the princess had been demoted, and he had been hiding the matter. Bai Xing thought that even if he didn't die, he would be sent to the lowest rank. Who knew that His Highness didn't do anything to him? Instead, after pondering for a long time, he ordered him to do something. It was a terrifying thing. The reason why the princess placed him by His Highness' side was not only because of his talent as a strategist, but also because of his medical skills. But the princess placed him by His Highness' side because she was afraid that His Highness would be plotted against. It was to save people. But that day, His Highness said, "I won't kill you, but you have to do one thing to atone for your crimes." He raised his head and rejoiced, but then he heard the other side say, "I will delay the trip for a few more days, and you will rush to Shizhou first and put poison in the only water source, Tianxi Lake." A smile gradually appeared on the youth's face. "It doesn't have to be too serious. Just let them think that they are infected with the epidemic and are panicking. After all, the drought tormented the human body until it's weak. It's pardonable for the disease to take advantage of it." Bai Xing was extremely unwilling. Those people were already suffering from the drought. If they fell sick again, they would die. He lowered his head deeply. I learned medical skills, it's the art of saving people," but his words made the other side laugh in a low voice. Gong Dai looked at him condescendingly. He was clearly laughing, but the coldness in his eyes made people shudder. "Know how to save people? Naturally, you will kill people. Don't you think so?" Chapter 85. In the end, Bai Xing had no choice but to do as he was told. He arrived at Shizhou first and saw that the people there were indeed suffering because of the lack of water. He couldn't bear it, but he had to poison the water. He used the lightest amount, making people feel dizzy, weak, vomiting and fainting after drinking the water. It shouldn't kill people, but even so, these people suffered a lot. There was no food, little water, and some people even fell sick. It might even be a plague. It was easy to imagine how scared the people were. Just when people were in despair and wails filled the sky, His Highness was like a god descending to earth and saving them. This young man was so good at acting. In front of his grandfather, he was a proud, stubborn, awkward and wrong child. In front of the princess, he was a simple, intelligent and cold young man. In front of people like them, he was a ruthless prince who would do anything to achieve his goals. But in front of these people, he was a reincarnated fairy child. He personally knelt on the ground to feed medicine to the dirty old people. He also stayed up for several nights to help the doctors treat everyone. He personally delivered food to those who didn't have the strength to receive it. In the end, when he was giving out porridge, he fainted from exhaustion in front of the people. Probably people would look like whoever they followed, just like the princess, who also seemed to have 1,000 faces. But Bai Xing knew that the princess and His Highness were different. The princess was fickle, but her heart was tolerant and kind. His Highness was fickle, but it was just to cover up his dark side and make people let down their guard. When he didn't take action, he was submissive, but when he took action, he would uproot the weeds. When Bai Xing thought of this, Gong Dai happened to notice him and looked at him with a smile. But Gong Dai's smile, under the sunlight, almost froze him. In a flash, a year had passed. Originally, Gong Yimo thought that 2 years would be enough to build the main canal. But now, because she wanted to push it inland, the project was much bigger. During this period, the project payment was delayed a few times, but it was paid in the end. She didn't know what happened in the capital, but according to the storytellers, the fighting in the imperial city was very fierce every day. 3 women were a drama, but what about the 20 to 30 princes and princesses? In addition, there were powerful women behind them. There were new revelations every day. However, what caught Gong Yimo's attention recently was a rumor. In the past year, Gong Yimo thought that she had done a lot of good things for the people. However, she was an expert, invited by Gong Che. Therefore, this gratitude naturally extended to Gong Che. In addition, Gong Che truly loved the people as if they were his own children. He personally built the canal for more than a year, but not a single person died from overwork. There were also no major accidents. It could be said to be a miracle. They had been cultivating all the way, and now they were about to reach Huaiyang. The Jade Dragon City's inner canal was finally cleared and only the last step was left. When they arrived at Huaiyang and entered the Huai River, this main road could be considered to have been hastily opened up by 3/4. After all, before they came over, Su Yuan and the others had already gone north from the Huai River to the Heng River. From the Heng River to the capital, the Longting River was already very close. When the time came, they would open up the canal one by one, strengthen the embankment, and bring in a water source. As for the river that extended inland, 2 years would be enough if she used her magic to support it. Nowadays, whenever they went to a place, other than building the canal, Gong Che would also investigate the people's lives and flip through provincial cases. Along the way, they even solved a few old cases. Gong Yimo would come up with some small inventions when she had nothing to do. Many things that were not eye-catching in the modern world would be of great use in ancient times. Especially because she was a woman, when many people came to see her because of her reputation, they unconsciously instilled faith in their own girl. Therefore, Gong Yimo became the object of worship for all women in the world. She was even more popular than handsome men. Therefore, every time they left, there would be people who were reluctant to see them off. Every time they arrived at a place, there would be people lining the streets to welcome them. As long as this popular sentiment was used well, the throne would definitely fall into Gong Che's hands. However, water could carry a boat, but it could also sink it. A good reputation was not only a sharp blade that could kill people, but it could also be a guillotine that could be used to kill people. Gong Yimo listened to the storyteller praising Gong Che to the skies and felt rather uneasy. No wonder Brother Crown Prince had been frowning recently. It was obvious that he had also heard these rumors. Under the instigation of people with ulterior motives, the people who had already received their kindness did not understand the twists and turns of the upper clans. They were used for no reason, and it was easy to do bad things with good intentions. After all, no emperor would like someone's reputation to overshadow his. Gong Yimo returned home worriedly and happened to bump into Gong Dai's letter from her trusted aide. Over the past year, she did not know how Gong Dai had operated in the West Province. Through Jinshi of Gojoseon's letters that were full of praise for him, Gong Dai seemed to have easily gained the favor of the people of the West Province. What was even more peculiar was that his good reputation was built on his modesty. He did not claim credit for his achievements. Instead, he brought credit to the emperor time and time again, causing the emperor to pity and love him. The emperor rewarded him several times and even put him in charge of the 30,000 soldiers under Jinshi of Gojoseon, becoming the jade-faced general. Gong Yimo could not help but sigh. In this aspect, she was far less meticulous than Gong Dai and did not do as well as him. The West Province's canal project was progressing at a rapid pace. With the combined efforts of the 100,000 soldiers and the people, Gong Dai would be able to put down the matters there and come back soon. After all, Gong Dai's job was mainly to survey the area and provide technical guidance. As for how long it would take to dig through the West Province, it would depend on Jinshi of Gojoseon. This was also a great merit. She did not know what kind of reward he would receive when he returned. Gong Yimo opened the letter and read it carefully. However, the more she read, the more she frowned. It turned out that Gong Dai had discovered a strange tunnel during one of his excavations. When he sneaked in to take a look, he even encountered Liu Ye's scouts. Thinking back to what Kim Yoon had said about Liu Ye's strange movements, Gong Yimo's eyebrows twitched. She quickly replied to him. The general content of the letter was to tell him not to be greedy and to come back as soon as the canal project was completed and he was no longer needed. In the capital, he would be rewarded. In addition, his business had been expanding over the past year. He could live a comfortable life and no longer have to worry about anyone. Gong Yimo had originally thought that with her royal sister's absolute authority, Gong Dai would definitely listen to her. However, she did not think that just being a rich and idle prince was not what Gong Dai wanted. What he wanted was real power in his hands and a deeper ambition. After sending the letter, Gong Yimo felt a little uneasy. Coincidentally, Gong Che returned at this time. Seeing his tired expression, Gong Yimo could not help but ask. "What's wrong, brother Crown Prince?" Seeing Gong Yimo, Gong Che's mood seemed to improve a lot. He shook his head. At the age of 17, he had become even more handsome. Along the way, he had captured the hearts of many girls. Now, even his frowning and tired appearance was very handsome. It seems that someone has spent a lot of effort to instigate it. We can't find the source. This rumor can't be suppressed. Chapter 86. Gong Yimo deeply frowns. Gong Che says again, with such a big effort, "I reckon there's a backup plan." He rubs his eyebrows in annoyance. Unlike the other princes who fight for the imperial power, he really wants to do good for the people. Every time he does something, he receives the sincere gratitude of the people. That sense of accomplishment is not something that can be brought to him by fighting for power. But while he spares no effort to do good, there are people in the capital who spares no effort to harm him. He is not afraid that his power will be taken away, but he is afraid that the person who replaces him will ruin things because of his eagerness to gain merit. He still remembers how many people died in order to repair a summer palace when he was young. The officials did not treat people as human beings in order to curry favor with Imperial Father, but Imperial Father only cares about the results and does not care how many people died. He does not want this Grand Canal that he poured all his faith and passion into, to be ruined like this. Gong Yimo can't help but comfort him. "Don't worry, Imperial Father is a person who is deeply righteous. He won't care about these rumors. No emperor wants to hear that there is someone who has a higher reputation than him, but Gong Cheng is a wise emperor after all. Even if his heart is uncomfortable, he will not flare up at Gong Che because of this." In order to divert attention, Gong Yimo suddenly raises her eyebrows and says with a smile, "That's right, today my little captain sent me a message and reported the production of the past year. Let me guess, how many ships do I have in my hands?" Gong Che can't help but laugh. He doesn't know how his imperial sister is so resourceful that she can even get a shipyard. It's just that shipbuilding is complicated. A large ship can't be completed without 3 to 5 months. In just a year, how many ships can she have? Gong Yimo sees that he doesn't answer, so she mysteriously shows 2 fingers. 2 ships. Gong Che shakes his head. This is too little. Who knows that Gong Yimo laughs with her hands on her hips? It's 20 ships. But it's not a large ship, it's 20 medium-sized cargo ships. Originally, he was shocked by Gong Yimo's number, but after hearing that it's 20 cargo ships, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although this number is also very surprising, it is still acceptable. However, Gong Yimo smiled even more mysteriously. This time, the ship's captain didn't come just to pass on a message. He also brought a big gift overnight. If Brother Crown Prince has nothing else to do, why don't you come with me to take a look? Gong Che was already upset. Hearing what she said, he also wanted to go out for a walk. The two of them quietly went out in the night. The moon was especially bright tonight. Gong Yimo had brought a horse from somewhere, and the two of them rode on the same horse, rushing towards a certain place. At this moment, they were already outside the city. Looking at the direction they were heading, it turned out to be the canal that had been repaired half a month ago. If he remembered correctly, the canal had just been connected to the water source not long ago. It was at the valley. Although it was a bit far, Gong Emo and Gong Che finally arrived at their destination after half an hour of traveling on horseback and using Qinggong. At this moment, they were in the valley and heard the gurgling sound of flowing water. This section of the river channel had already been excavated, so water had been drawn in. However, because it was in the mountains, the flow of water was not fast. What exactly are you bringing me to see? Gong Che was a little puzzled. They had come so far, what was there to see in the valley? Gong Yimo smiles mysteriously and pulls him in a direction. Because they were in the forest, Qinggong could not be used, so she pulled Gong Che the whole way and ran very fast. It was already autumn, and the night was still a little cold. When they looked up, they could see the bright moonlight. A gust of wind blew past, and the sound of the trees rustling could be heard. Gong Che could not help but look at their tightly held hands, and a trace of tenderness flashed in his eyes. He abided by his oath. As long as she was by his side, it was fine. He could control himself and not overstep his boundaries. Therefore, it had been a long time since they had such intimate contact. It was so long that he missed it. Gong Che looked at Gong Yimo's back in front of him. She was wearing a silver-white man's robe, and her hair was tied up with a man's crown. Even so, Gong Che still felt that she was extraordinarily beautiful. The bright moonlight seemed to make her clothes shine. Her entire person was like a fluorescent butterfly that brought him through the forest. Everything was so beautiful that it was like a dream. After walking for an unknown period of time, Gong Yimo stopped and turned around to cover his eyes. Gong Yimo has grown taller. She was tall, about 1.68 meters, so when she tiptoed, it was easy for her to cover Gong Che's eyes. She proudly said in his ear, "Come, Crown Prince Gidge. Walk a few more steps forward to the left." Her warm breath made Gong Che's heart go numb. He almost numbly listened to Gong Yimo's instructions before walking. For a moment, he did not have time to think about what the surprise she was talking about was. Dang, 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 dang. Gong Yimo suddenly removed her hand and let out a joyful cheer. The moment Gong Che opened his eyes, he was still a bit unaccustomed. When he focused his eyes, he could no longer control his shock and softly let out a gasp. This is... Gong Yimo proudly said with a smile. Shocked, right? You didn't expect this, right? This is the masterpiece that my shipyard spent an entire year to painstakingly create. She jumped a few steps to Gong Che's side and loudly laughed. I calculated that without including the other tributaries and the time needed to repair the dam, we will be able to open the main canal by the end of this year. And at the end of the year, it just so happens to be Imperial Father's birthday. At that time, we will lead the way and have tens of thousands of citizens follow us. We will give this huge ship to Imperial Father as a congratulatory gift. How about it? That's right, in front of Gong Che was a huge monster that he had never seen before. It was 4 stories tall and stopped on the water like a walking palace. It was mighty and domineering, like a king overlooking all living things. And on both sides of the ship, there were countless scale-like designs. The scales were suffused with a cold light. It was actually completely covered in metal. This kind of design was unprecedented. On the other side, after Gong Yimo's excitement, she felt a bit emotional and melancholy. She looked at the huge ship in front of her that she had spent so much effort on. At that time, there was no electric welding, so there was no way to cover the ship with metal. She had only thought of using fish scales to cover the ship with metal armor when she saw it by chance. She lightly said, "When the time comes, as long as we offer this huge ship and there are so many citizens to celebrate Imperial Father's birthday, Imperial Father will be so happy that he will definitely not care about these rumors. Next year, you can relax and repair the dam and tributaries. Try to finish it all in 2 years. Your name will go down in history." As she said that, she sighed slightly in her heart. When she gave the order to build this ship, her original intention was to please the Emperor. After all, the Emperor treated her well, and she also had the same respect and love for the Emperor as she did for her father. But now that the situation was pressing, she had no choice but to think of such a way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Although it was still a gift, her intentions were not pure. Forget it. She only hoped that the Emperor would like it. Thinking of that uncle, Gong Yimo could not help but smile. Chapter 87. After receiving Gong Yimo's letter, this was the first time that Gong Dai did not show any joy. The royal sister wanted him to return to the capital. Yes, if he returned to the capital now, he would be rewarded by the Emperor. He would have power and money. If he managed it well, money could make the world go round. It would be so cool for him to be a wealthy prince. However, he was not willing to accept it. Now that Lu Yi was ready to make a move, it was very likely that he would take advantage of the heavy snow to make a sudden move and catch them off guard. He could not just leave like this. Putting aside the noble words of innocent people, he wanted more. The 30,000 soldiers in his hands were not enough to satisfy him. Therefore, he had to make a contribution. Using contributions to exchange for power. Gong Dai wanted to find out for himself. Jinshi of Gojoseon was the first to object. He thought that Gong Dai was just making groundless accusations. A tunnel was nothing. There were many such tunnels between countries. Who would not have such thoughts? Lu Ye's secret visit to Yuheng did not prove anything. Moreover, it was cold here in winter. They did not even have enough food. How could they come here to fight? In the end, he just could not bear to see the people suffer. Jinshi of Gojoseon had guarded Shizhou for 10 years. There had never been a war here. Once he approved of Gong Dai's idea, the people would have to prepare for war. The new year was the most relaxing time of the year. He did not want to cause panic because of such a shadowy thing. However, Gong Dai did not think so. Judging from the quality of the soil, the tunnel had just been completed. It was obviously dug by Lu Yi to find out more about the situation. If the tunnel had been dug since Lu Ye's secret visit to Yuheng a year ago, it would have been completed not long ago. No food. Could it be that Lu Ye's actions a year ago were not to borrow food from Yuheng? Perhaps they had already reached some kind of agreement. Gong Dai believed in his intuition. Gong Yimo had said before that the human brain would imperceptibly store and analyze a lot of information. That was why intuition was created. Sometimes, intuition could be trusted. But Grandpa didn't believe him. Gong Dai thought for a moment, then suddenly smiled. So what if Grandpa didn't believe him? He decided to do it in secret. Bai Sheng was the first to disagree. Your Highness, since the princess has already arranged everything, why don't you follow her wishes? He really didn't want Gong Dai's idea to come true, because once a war was started, it would no longer be a matter of one person, but a country. Over the past year, he had developed a friendship with the people of Western Zhou. He really didn't want anything to happen. Moreover, the princess asked His Highness to return to the capital and use this merit to fight for the construction of the canal. He heard that the canal could be completed in 2 years. When the time comes, it will be a great merit that will be passed down through the ages. Coupled with the merit of repairing the canal, His Highness's future will be much smoother. The princess painstakingly fought for such a good retreat. Why is His Highness unwilling to do it? Gong Ju naturally understood Bai Xing's thoughts. He sat on the hill and looked at the endless horizon in front of him. The evening sunset in Western Zhou was particularly beautiful. It was as if the clouds were burning, and it seemed to burn his heart. Gong Dai's cold eyes became calmer and more determined. He slowly said, "Repairing the canal is naturally a great merit, but now, the Crown Prince has been in power for a year. If I go, no matter how hard I try, I can't suppress the Crown Prince." After he finished speaking, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. It wasn't that he didn't want to see Gong Yimo sooner. It had been a year and a half. Had she changed? But he remembered more clearly what he wanted. He wanted his royal sister. He wanted to have the power to intimidate the world. He wanted to have the power to make everyone shut up. This was far from what a rich prince could have. He only wanted military power. Only then could he firmly control everyone's life and death, in the palm of his hand. But, how can we find out the truth? Bai Sheng was still resisting. He didn't want Gong Dai to take the risk. Gong Dai pulled out the yellow grass under his feet and lightly said, "Since they can come through the secret passage to check the news, why can't we go through?" His idea was so crazy that Bai Xing didn't refute him for a long time. Using the enemy's secret passage to spy on the enemy's situation. Only the skilled and daring Gong Dai would have such an idea. At night, a group of black-clothed people appeared at the border of Lu Yi. The leader was obviously a young man. His face was covered, and only his eyes were exposed. It was a pair of very cold ink-black eyes. They had just secretly come through the secret passage. After killing the guards at the exit, they found themselves in Lu Ye's territory. Lu Ye's people really did have evil intentions. They actually dug such a long tunnel directly into the country. The people who followed Gong Dai here were all death soldiers. Gong Dai had money and people in his hands, so it was easy for him to train a few death soldiers. It was just that he had such a long-term vision at such a young age. It was as if he could predict the future. The few of them ran quickly in the dark night. They didn't know how far they had gone. "Your Highness. There's a fire in front." Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and looked over. Sure enough, there seemed to be people setting up camp in front. He hurriedly made a hand gesture. Everyone spread out and moved forward. If there were any abnormalities, they would hide and wait for Gong Dai's signal. As such, they quickly approached the fire. Lu Ye's people also spoke Chinese. They looked down on the thin and weak people of the inland, and envied their culture. The aristocrats would communicate with each other in the Eagle language. It was considered the exclusive language of the aristocrats to prevent leaks. This camp was obviously not an ordinary one. It was very large, and there were patrols everywhere, as if they were guarding something. Gong Dai stuck close to a stone and looked inside. The tall people were wearing thin armor in such cold weather. Their eyes were looking into the distance, and they were always on guard. Other than the patrol team, the laughter of women could be heard coming from the large tents in the middle. A large bonfire was lit at the entrance. Many people were eating meat and drinking wine around the bonfire. They looked very happy. Gong Dai's heart trembled slightly. Lu Yi really did make a move. Otherwise, why would they set up camp here in the middle of nowhere? He couldn't help but think of a sentence that royal sister had once said. Before the army moves, the provisions move first. Meng Na. How long do you think we have to wait? Looking at the weather, it seems that the first snow is coming. Snow came early in the West Province, and it would last for a few months. The one called Meng Na was a burly man. He drank wine and narrowed his eyes. In a few days, when the army holds the line and the snow comes, we'll catch them off guard. Gong Dai, who was sneaking in, happened to hear his words. Provisions, it was really provisions. His heart trembled slightly, and he hid like a ghost. If this was really a place where provisions were piled up, then there must be countless people guarding it. As expected, the angry voices of Lu Ye's people came from not far away. His people must have been discovered. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes slightly. He knew that this was not the time to show off. He had to hide and wait for an opportunity to make a move. This was a great opportunity that was presented to him. He couldn't resist this temptation. Chapter 88. The sound of footsteps could be heard from all directions. This place was indeed heavily guarded. He sneaked into a small tent in a flash. A woman inside was about to scream when Gong Dai knocked her unconscious and dragged her to a dark place. Soon, the sound of footsteps came over. A man fiercely lifted the curtain and asked, "Inside. Did you see anyone suspicious?" A little girl bowed her head in fear. No. Seeing her timid appearance, the man was too lazy to ask and went straight to the next tent. Gong Dai listened attentively for a while and confirmed that the man had gone far. He then stood up and dragged the woman out from under the bed. Lu Ye's hierarchy was very clear, and it could be seen from the clothes he wore. Civilians could only wear dark blue, dark green, black, gray and other colors. The higher the rank, the brighter the color. The most honorable color was gold, the color of the sun. Just now, he had loosened his hair to cover his face. In addition, he was still young and did not have the handsome figure that he would later have. Moreover, he had casually put on a woman's clothes. At first glance, he looked quite stunning. And this clothes was light purple. But the woman in front of him lived in the most remote tent. It could be seen that she was a songstress. Gong Dai's eyes seemed to be burning. He slightly raised the corner of his mouth and looked meaningfully at the woman in front of him. The woman slowly woke up. Before she could scream, Gong Dai covered her mouth. He showed the purest smile. His black jade-like eyes flickered under the light of the fire in the tent. "Do you want to make a deal?" The excavation of the canal continued, but because the rumors were getting more and more intense, it made Gong Yimo feel a sense of crisis. She could not help but be more careful with the use of lust, reducing the dosage. From time to time, she would perform a few times in front of people. Many people who came because of the fame were disappointed and thought that the rumors were exaggerated and did not live up to the name. But she still had to do it. She looked up at the huge monster in front of her and was very happy. Such a beautiful steel ship wrapped in metal, Gong Qing would definitely like it, right? She looked at the ship and saw that there was nothing else to add. She could not help but touch her chin and think, should she make a majestic dragon head in front? After all, it seemed that emperors liked dragons, right? Gong Yimo decided to do it right away. She planned to personally carve a model for the craftsman to complete. At that time, she would get a super luxurious dragon boat as a birthday present. That uncle definitely hadn't received it before. However, the atmosphere outside was still becoming increasingly tense. Finally, one afternoon, one of Gong Che's most trusted advisors came to look for Gong Yimo. He looked flustered and almost tripped several times when he ran over. Bad news. What happened? Gong Yimo put down the mold in his hand and looked at him with a slight frown. That person's mouth moved, but in the end, he really didn't know what to say. He only said, "You should go to the river and take a look." When Gong Yimo heard this, she hurriedly followed him. In the end, she felt that he was too slow and used her Qin Gong to head towards the river. There were already quite a number of people gathered there. It is said that when King Wu excavated the Jade Dragon Canal, on the day the canal was completed, a bronze cauldron was sunk to suppress the river. Has it been dug out now? That's right. I heard that there are words on it. What words? Rumors flashed past Gong Yimo's ears. When she pushed through the crowd, Gong Che was already there. That cauldron, which was said to be an ancient relic, was covered up. It seemed that Gong Che was preparing to transport it away. However, what was the use of transporting it away now? Gong Yimo took a few steps forward. Gong Che was in a daze and didn't stop her, allowing her to lift up the cover. Indeed, it was a large cauldron with spots of copper. There were 3 sides of the cauldron. One was the head of a cow, a goat, and a pig. It symbolized the sacrifice of 3 animals. Below the cow's head, there were a few very eye-catching words engraved on it. The man who built the canal will bless the world. These rebellious words once again appeared in front of everyone, causing a burst of exclamations. Gong Yimo frowned as she looked at it. Suddenly, she laughed and said, "This was the sacrifice that King Wu gave to the river god after he built the canal. He wanted to use the canal to conquer the world. Why did he cover it up?" Gong Yimo's words caused the crowd to whisper. Just now, they all thought that this was a sign from the heavens that the crown prince should inherit the throne. Hearing Gong Yimo's words, it was more like King Wu's wish to himself. Gong Che's face looked better, but it was still very pale. He and Gong Yimo looked at each other. They both knew that it wasn't important how the people saw this matter. What was important was how the person who passed the news to the emperor would pass on this matter. It was night, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. "Brother Crown Prince, how do you plan to deal with this matter?" Gong Yimo couldn't think of any clues. Because in her understanding, this was a very small matter. However, in this place, it could be a capital offense. Gong Che frowned slightly. At this moment, he had already thought it through. He planned to rush to the capital through the night. He would first take the water route to Su Yuan's place and then ride a horse. This matter could be big or small. He had to personally explain this matter to the emperor. Also, he hadn't seen his imperial mother for a long time. He also wanted to see her. Presumably, as long as he could arrive in time and explain Gong Yimo's theory of King Wu to his imperial father would feel much better. His idea wasn't without reason. In addition, Gong Yimo didn't have any better suggestions, so she agreed. She stayed behind to continue building the canal. However, the other party obviously didn't want to let them off so easily. Gong Yimo hadn't fallen asleep yet. A burst of hurried footsteps was heard. She quickly sat up. Following that, she heard a burst of crying. What happened? When she came out, she bumped into the person who came to report to her. Not good. The crown prince has been assassinated and his life is at stake. His words were like a warning bell, fiercely ringing in her ears. She hurried into the room, which was full of people. Most of them were the accompanying imperial doctors. How is the situation? Gong Yimo asked Imperial Dr. Su, who was checking the crown prince's pulse. Imperial Dr. Su frowned and shook his head. The situation is not good. A sword pierced through the crown prince's heart. If he didn't take a Dahuan pill in time to save his life, the crown prince will be in danger. Obviously, They were all close officials, but they were assassinated as soon as they left the house. There must be a mole. However, this was not the time to denounce them. Gong Yimo quickly called a person in. This person was the Crown Prince's study companion. He was absolutely trustworthy. You immediately set off to the capital by land and report to the Emperor about the Crown Prince's assassination. Don't delay. Yes. Gong Yimo looked at his back as he left. After thinking about it, she still felt that it was inappropriate. She called another person and told him to send 2 people, one by water and the other by land. But even so, she was still very uneasy. She stayed up all night and guarded Gong Che until dawn. Chapter 89. Go that way. Search carefully. That spy won't be able to escape. Put out the fire. Hurry up. Bring water. Why can't the fire be put out? The camp was in a complete mess. Screams, fire, and hurried footsteps could be heard everywhere. Several singers had been hacked to death by angry soldiers, but no one had cleaned up their bodies. A woman had died with her head raised on a haystack, her eyes wide open. If she could still see, she would have found that the culprit who had caused their tragic deaths was hiding in the haystack under her. Gong Dai wiped off the makeup on his face slowly, but his eyes were fixed on the search team that was getting closer and closer. At this time, he was wearing the same black armor as the other party, but his hair was still in a woman's bun. He couldn't move too much, because the armor on his body would make a sound. He couldn't be slow either, because the other party was already in front of him. Finally, when this group of people came closer, he lowered his body. When he saw that they were scattered to search, he waited for a moment when everyone's line of sight happened to shift, and quickly came out. With a backhand, he stabbed his sword into the body of the woman on the haystack. Blood splattered on his face, and someone looked at him strangely. He laughed, his face covered in blood couldn't be seen clearly. I just wanted to see if she was pretending to be dead. After that person heard Gong Dai's explanation, he didn't continue to stare at him, minding his own business in the haystack. And just now, if Gong Dai was a second slower, or a second faster, others would have seen him coming out from the haystack. Of course, if that was the case, he also had a way to deal with it. Just like that, he was extremely daring, and calmly followed the team to search for the person. There were more than 10,000 soldiers stationed to guard the provisions, but Gong Dai saw a few youths who were the same age as him in the team. This showed that Lu Yi had put a lot of capital into this war. Even such a small child was banished to the army. It can be seen that the army they were talking about was definitely no less than 200,000. Because they were young and useless, they were sent here as soldiers to escort provisions. Therefore, Gong Ju was very sure that they didn't know much about each other. But he wouldn't gamble, so the blood on his face and the darkness of the night were his best protection. After searching for a long time, they couldn't find anything. Someone looked at the burning granary with a sullen face and couldn't help but curse, "Are those people dead? Why wasn't the fire extinguished? If this goes on, the general will be here soon and none of us will be able to escape." Someone whispered, "It said that wine was used to start the fire. How is that possible? How could the wine catch fire?" "It is indeed wine. A few days ago, a songstress gave me a recipe that can make wine very strong. It's especially tasty, and the generals especially like it." They drank to their heart's content for a few days in a row. Today, all the generals died at the hands of one person, because they were drunk. "That's right. I drank that wine yesterday, and it's very strong. The lords are all very happy." Originally, they wanted to use this wine to make a lot of money after returning to the city, but they didn't expect it to become a death sentence for us. Who knew that the wine could actually burn? This is simply unheard of. Gong Dai, who was following behind them, also had a miserable look on his face, but he was quickly calculating whether he had missed anything. His man caught the woman and asked if she wanted to make a deal. He told her that as long as she could bring him to Lu Yi when she returned to the country, he would tell her a way to make a fortune. That was distilled wine. One had to know that Lu Yi and Daiyu State were the same. Most of the alcohol was fruit wine and rice wine, and the alcohol content was very low. For a man like Lu Yi, who was on horseback, drinking it was like drinking water. Therefore, in Lu Yi, almost everyone would not get drunk after 1,000 cups. But this person said that he had a way to make the wine very strong. If it was true, then it would definitely be very popular in Lu Yi. The woman's eyes lit up, as if she could see a lot of money rolling in. In the end, she couldn't resist the temptation and agreed because in Lu Yi, a singer could redeem herself. As long as she had enough money, she would no longer be a plaything. Moreover, she had a plan in mind. If the person in front of her really had a way to improve the wine, she would first trick him and then expose him. If he didn't, then she would directly send him to see the general. No matter what, it would be a great merit. And Gong Dai was just a little girl, so no matter what she did, she wouldn't be able to do anything. Yes, Gong Dai was still young, and her eyes were delicate. Moreover, she had changed her voice with her vocal mimicry, so no matter how one looked at her, she was still a girl. Therefore, the singer sold her body and finally persuaded the manager to allow them to try the method of improving the wine. Gong Dai disguised herself as a singer and used the most basic tools to purify the wine for them. The distillation method was very simple, but after the distillation, a few ingredients were added by those skillful hands, and the wine immediately became clear and rich. When the manager tasted it, it was as spicy as burning fire, and as soft as a wave of heat. He was immediately overjoyed. What were they fighting for? Wasn't it for money? With this wine, would they still be afraid of not being able to make a fortune? Therefore, he hurriedly ordered Gong Dai to prepare more. It would be best if he could purify all the wine in the camp. He prepared to recommend it to the generals at the evening banquet. After all, they took the majority of the profits, so he would still get some soup. And the amount of wine in the camp was really plentiful. When fighting in the cold weather, wine was the best thing to keep warm, so naturally, there would be no shortage. Gong Ju agreed, pretending that he couldn't see the calculating eyes of the steward and the singer. Perhaps they had already conspired. As long as he finished steaming the wine, and they were familiar with the process and techniques, they would take him to the garrison. It was a pity that wealth blinded the eyes, and wealth came from danger. Moreover, they were watching closely, so what could this person do? As expected, Gong Dai didn't do anything. He obediently purified the dozen or so jars of wine and watched them move the wine back to the heavily guarded granary. Gong Dai smiled slightly. After 2 days of observation, every night, a bonfire would be lit around the granary. Not only did it raise the temperature and ensure that the food was dry, it also prevented people from sneaking in under the cover of darkness. Therefore, all of this was so unlogical. Gong Dai looked at the firelight. His black jade-like eyes were as dark as an abyss, as if they could suck people in. Sure enough, after 2 days of this wine's popularity, the manager and the singer had also figured out all the techniques of distilling wine. When the general heard the manager's tip-off, he smiled coldly and waved his hand in a daze. He wanted to see this person who seemed to be a spy but had brought them wealth. And it was said that it was a girl. The main tent was always filled with singing and dancing, especially at night. It was as if they were not here to fight, but to celebrate. But ever since Gong Dai's wine, they were intoxicated and didn't know what was going on in the world. When they entered the tent, it was already past 30. The generals in the main tent were all swaying left and right. They didn't even take this little girl, who was suspected of being a spy, seriously. The general in charge of the defense stretched out his hand to Gong Dai. Gong Dai raised his head and smiled sweetly. The moment his stunning face was illuminated by the firelight, several people's eyes were fixed on him, but very soon, it was an assassination attempt that caused a complete mess. Gong Dai alone killed 3 of the generals guarding here and released a signal flare. 8 men of sacrifice attacked from a direction. The soldiers stationed here didn't know how many people came. They only knew that there was a deafening battle cry and a signal flare. They didn't know if there was an army lying in ambush nearby. The entire camp gradually panicked. Everyone was approaching one place. Gong Dai took advantage of the chaos to kill his way to the granary, broke the wine vat, and set it on fire. The wine ignited as soon as it came into contact with the fire. Before the guards could recover from their shock, the fire was already out of control. Even water couldn't extinguish it. The granary, which was enough to feed an army of 200,000 for a month, was instantly surrounded by flames. He was alone, and easily turned an imminent sneak attack into a false illusion. The camp of more than 10,000 people was in chaos because of him. And the culprit was taking advantage of the chaos. That calm and unruffled was something that even a slightly weaker person wouldn't be able to do. Could it be that they had encountered a ghost? She was just a singer. Where could she hide? Chapter 90. Gong Yimo spent the whole night thinking about it. First, there were rumors, then the sacrificial cauldron was dug out, and now the crown prince was attacked by an assassin. This series of events was obviously aimed at the crown prince, but there must be a backup plan. Moreover, there must be a mole among them. Gong Yimo couldn't help but think about the people in the harem. Lu Xianfei had power in her hands, and Long Guifei had money in her hands. It seemed that Lu Xianfei was more likely to be involved, but Gong Yimo suddenly stood up. Li Ku was the son of the Minister of Revenue, and Long Guifei's father was also a member of the Ministry of Revenue. Could it be that the Ministry of Revenue had colluded to this point? Impossible. Li Ku. She had investigated this person before. He was not the eldest son of the family, but he was ambitious and wanted to make a career for himself. There were many people in the capital who praised him. He was a rare upright young master. Moreover, his father, the Minister of Revenue, and Long Guifei's father, who was in charge of the Ministry of Revenue, did not get along well with each other. The possibility of them cooperating was not high. Therefore, when Gong Yimo was selecting the younger generation, she recognized Li Ku. As if to prove her guess, a bright imperial edict arrived. Because the crown prince was not in, the crown prince's entourage, Assistant Minister Lu, received the edict. Gong Yimo leaned on the door and listened. The imperial edict actually asked the crown prince to return to the capital immediately. But the crown prince's life was at stake. How could the emperor not care about his son's life? The only explanation was that the emperor was so anxious to see her, not the crown prince. And to see her, it could only be for the sake of the emperor's wife. Gong Yimo admitted that the temptation of the emperor's wife was great, but with the emperor's character, he would not disregard his own child's life to snatch it. The only possibility was that something happened that she didn't know, and changed the whole direction of the situation. When the eunuch left, Assistant Minister Lu held the imperial edict and didn't know what to do. Gong Yimo came over, and he seemed to have seen his savior. He was a man in his 30s. When he saw Gong Yimo, his eyes lit up and he ran over. "Your Royal Highness, what should we do? Your Highness's life is at stake. How can you be tired from the journey? Even if we take a boat, we can't go straight to the capital." Gong Yimo indicated for him to calm down. She looked at the shining imperial edict in the other's hand. After a long time, she exhaled. Brother Crown Prince definitely can't endure the pain of being tossed around. We can only wait for him to wake up. Assistant Minister Lu's face was bitter. But the Imperial Edict ordered us to set out immediately. Gong Yimo smiled helplessly. A trace of determination flashed in his eyes. Then we can only disobey the Imperial Edict. Assistant Minister Lu was frightened by her. That's a capital offense. Gong Yimo shrugged and smiled. So what? After saying this, she walked towards Gong Che's room, leaving Assistant Minister Lu standing there in a daze, not knowing what to do. The Emperor's Imperial Edict was very clear. He wanted the Crown Prince to bring everyone back to the capital to be bestowed with the title. The canal had not been completed yet, so what was there to be bestowed with? Gong Yimo smiled. It didn't matter. No matter what unexpected things happened, this time, she would definitely not let the formula be leaked. Even if someone told on her, so what? It would be discovered sooner or later anyway. Even if Li Ku really betrayed him, even if he really got together with Imperial concubine Long behind his father's back, so what? She wasn't angry. Wasn't it just betrayal? But when she thought of the time when they drank and talked, listening to him talk about the future, his eyes full of confidence and high spirits, it made Gong Yimo's heart ache. She really didn't want to believe that he was that kind of person. Gong Yimo took the lead in disobeying the Imperial Edict. Although the entire group complained, no one objected. Gong Che still didn't show any signs of waking up, and the Imperial physician continued to take care of him. Gong Emo looked at the dark clouds in the sky, and a crazy idea suddenly popped up in her mind. 2 days passed like this. Before Gong Yimo could make up her mind, she heard an announcement. The eunuch who announced the Imperial Edict came again and brought the Emperor's second Imperial Edict. Gong Yimo hid behind the screen and listened to the eunuch read the Imperial Edict in a sharp voice. After Assistant Minister Lu heard it, he knelt on the ground and almost fainted. In the end, he gritted his teeth and accepted the edict. The eunuch looked around the room as if he was looking for someone. In the end, he snorted and walked away arrogantly. It's over. The Emperor actually suspected that the Crown Prince had disloyal intentions. Gong Yimo walked out and opened the Imperial Edict to take a look. It was written in cinnabar in bright red, cultivator of the canal, Long Zay the world. In addition, Gong Che didn't leave in time. The Emperor's intention was to question whether the Crown Prince really wanted to Long Zay the world. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth. She still hadn't received the news and didn't know if the 2 people she sent out had arrived in the capital. If they had arrived and met the Emperor still hadn't arrived and died on the way. When the Emperor saw Gong Che disobeying the Imperial Edict and heard such rumors, he was furious. So he ordered them to return to the capital immediately. She held the Imperial Edict tightly in her hand and didn't say a word. Princess, what should we do? Gong Yimo looked at everyone. Their faces were pale and their legs were trembling. In this era, disobeying an Imperial Edict was a capital offense. Those who came with the Crown Prince could be said to have their lives tied to the Crown Prince. But when they thought of their wives and children in the capital, they hesitated and wanted to return immediately. Gong Yimo saw this in her eyes and remembered it in her heart. Sure enough, Assistant Minister Lu glanced at everyone and whispered. Since His Majesty is in a hurry and issued 2 Imperial Edicts in a row, we can't disobey the Imperial Edict anymore. It's better to set off immediately. As for His Royal Highness, he couldn't think of a way to settle the Crown Prince for a while. After all, the Crown Prince was still hanging on by a thread. Who knows what will happen when he goes out? He couldn't care so much. If the Emperor got angry, millions of corpses would fall. Their families will also suffer. Gong Yimo glanced at more than a dozen people present. Imperial Dr. Su, Assistant Minister Lu, Imperial Dr. Su, Secretary Li, Gong Gong, etc. These people can be said to be her friends and partners who have been together for more than a year. But at this time, they looked anxious and frowned. They didn't dare to look up at her. Gong Yimo suddenly knelt on one knee. Everyone was shocked. "Princess! Why are you doing this?" Gong Yimo blocked Assistant Minister Lu's hand that came to support her. She straightened her back and looked at them firmly. "I am no longer a princess. Now that I am kneeling here, I only have one thing to ask." Assistant Minister Lu glanced at the others and didn't speak. They all thought that Gong Yimo wanted them to continue to resist the imperial edict. At least wait until the crown prince woke up and survived this disaster. But the imperial edict was in front of them, they really can't agree. But they didn't expect Gong Yimo to say, "I promise to set off back to the capital, but not now." Sure enough, Assistant Minister Lu frowned and didn't know how to refuse. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth, knelt down on both knees, and kowtowed to everyone. Chapter 91. Everyone was shocked by this bow. Their brains almost couldn't wrap their heads around it. A person like the princess was actually forced to kneel. Gong Yimo raised her head and begged in a low voice, "Just give me 7 days. After 7 days, everyone will set off immediately. After all, if we set off now, regardless of whether we first take the water route, then the land route, or the entire journey by land, with so many people, it will take 11 or 12 days to reach the capital. I promise everyone that as long as everyone can wait here for another 7 days, I can guarantee that we will reach the capital within 12 days. I beg everyone to believe me this time." "How is that possible?" Assistant Minister Lu didn't believe her. Gong Yimo looked at him with determination. "I will open up the main road within 7 days. We will take the boat back to the capital." Everyone looked at Gong Yimo with suspicion. They all knew about Su Yuan's progress. The last time Su Yuan sent a letter, he said that it would take at least a month to connect to the Longting River and open up the main road. Moreover, the road hadn't been cleared yet. Normal boats would be delayed if they encountered a flood, a strong wind, or a shocking beach. Even if Gong Yimo opened up the main road in 7 days, they might not be able to reach the capital within 5 days. Gong Yimo couldn't explain it. She could only repeat, "Please believe me. I won't let you down. I, Gong Yimo, will do what I say. Please believe me." She said it with certainty and sincerity. Everyone couldn't bear it. In the end, they still remembered that this princess was also the master who could break a mountain. Perhaps she really had magical powers that mortals didn't have. It was only 7 days. Moreover, the princess promised that they would reach the capital within the normal time. It wasn't considered defying the imperial edict. Moreover, they had already defied the imperial edict once. Then, they would defy the imperial edict again. The few of them reached a consensus without speaking. Assistant Minister Lu helped Gong Yimo up with both hands and sighed softly. "Our lives are all in the hands of the princess. We hope the princess will keep her promise." Gong Yimo smiled brightly, like the blue sky after the rain. She bowed gratefully, "Then, I will leave first. Brother Crown Prince still hasn't survived the calamity. Please keep your promise." "I promise that I will take a boat to bring everyone back to the capital in 7 days. We accept the order." Therefore, Gong Yimo did not dare to delay and left immediately. After she left, no one else was in the mood to continue their work. Fortunately, their main road had already reached the Huai River, and they were just building a dam. Now, they could only hope that the princess could really create a miracle and open up the canal in 7 days. The next day, the sun was high up in the sky. Many commoners saw that Gong Yimo and Gong Che had disappeared, so they asked about them. After all, these two people would appear every day. Water Division Supervisor Lee let out a long sigh. Right now, he was in a depressed mood. When he heard people repeatedly asking about it, he explained the cause and effect of the matter to the people. But he didn't expect that the people's reaction would be so strong. How could the emperor do this? The crown prince is such a good person, how could he have the heart to rebel? He probably listened to slanderous rumors. Haven't there been a lot of trouble in the capital in recent years? Between the princes, their eyes are about to turn red. The pitiful crown prince's life is still hanging by a thread, and he has to be slandered like this. When Supervisor Lee said that Gong Yimo had promised to open up the north and south canals in a week, the farmers beside him heard that and unexpectedly, none of them refuted. Supervisor Lee felt that it was very strange. Why were these commoners' reactions so calm when they all felt that it was impossible? At this time, he heard a man carrying a hose say loudly, "If it was someone else, I wouldn't believe it. But if it was that young lady, even if she said that she wanted to poke a hole in the sky, I, Denyo, would still believe it." What was even more strange was that the others all agreed. In just a short year, Gong Yimo had created too many miracles. Most of them had received Gong Yimo's grace and sincerely believed that this young lady was indeed not ordinary. When Supervisor Lee heard their words, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart, "Yes, we are confused. How could there be something that she can't do?" After he finished speaking, he began to talk about Gong Yimo's past identity, including how she rose from the cold palace, how she was favored, how she benefited the people, and how she was demoted. After he finished, he couldn't help but praise himself. The princess was so young, but she had already created so many miracles. Someone said loudly, "So she's the Chaoyang princess." Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he touched his head embarrassedly. "Isn't it because of my son? He's still studying in a private school. He used to tell us about the Chaoyang princess's deeds. He said that if she didn't improve the papermaking and printing technology, books wouldn't be so cheap. Only the poor can afford to study. If that's the case, she's a saintly figure." In this era, to be able to study was a very honorable thing for the commoners. However, because paper was expensive and printing was difficult, many people could only dream of it but couldn't get it. However, because of Gong Yimo's unintentional action, the threshold for studying was lowered. That was why children from poor families like them could study in school. Many people sighed. Why didn't the emperor like such a smart and good girl? Therefore, Gong Yimo's reputation spread far and wide without her knowledge. Even the water filtration system that she developed and popularized among the commoners was dug up. In the past, people mostly used well water and river water. Although there was no industrial pollution, it wasn't very clean. Didn't they still drink dead rats and fish as usual? Since the water filtration system was developed, the principle was simple. After it was popularized in every village, the number of people who got sick from drinking water decreased a lot. Some wealthier cities even built tap water and sewer pipes in a small area. It was very clean and convenient. There were also people who came back from the west. They also said that the construction of wells and canals in Shizhou was the idea of the Chaoyang princess. Once it was completed, Shizhou would no longer have to suffer from drought. Not to mention, the construction of the canal this time was also the princess's idea. Once it was completed, the north and south would be able to trade. Not only would it solve the problem of water consumption, transportation, and prosperity for the commoners. It couldn't be better. The princess even wanted to push the waterways inland. One had to know that there were many places inland that needed to buy water to drink. If what the princess said was true, and the world was traversed by waterways, the people would no longer have to suffer from drought and floods. If there were natural disasters, they could save themselves. Trade between the north and south would be convenient, and everyone would be self-sufficient. Wait, this Chaoyang princess was talented and intelligent. She was resourceful and broad-minded. As a woman, she could help the world. In the capital, she could be said to be the object of admiration in the hearts of many men. Not to mention that she was only 13 years old. She was really not inferior to a man. She was really a hero from a young age. How could there be people who didn't like such a wonderful woman? Chapter 92. People were more and more concerned about whether the princess could really do what she said, to be able to connect the north and south in 7 days. At that time, it would be another great feat that would be passed down through the ages. At the same time, they were more worried that such a princess who served the country and the people would be beheaded by the emperor because she defied the emperor. That would be a loss to the world. Gong Emo spent 2 days, without sleep or rest, rushing day and night to reach Hingshui. She directly broke into Su Yuan's room. At this time, Su Yuan was also not asleep and was thinking hard in front of the table. When he saw Gong Emo, he rubbed his eyes, thinking that he was seeing things. "Princess, why are you here?" After saying this, his expression suddenly became strange. What happened? He said it with certainty, as if he knew what would happen. Gong Emo was extremely tired, but when she heard his words, she instinctively frowned. "What do you know?" Su Yuan was stunned by her question, and a vexed expression appeared on his face. 2 days ago, Li Ku passed by here. Gong Emo was already prepared, but when she heard this, she couldn't help but tremble. "It's okay, she was just too tired." Seeing her pale face, Su Yuan couldn't bear it. "Princess, don't be too sad." When Su Yuan said this, he was very angry. We didn't expect Li Ku to be such a person. For the sake of ambition, he didn't even tell his friends to the emperor. 2 days ago, he was ordered to return to the capital. With the emperor's imperial edict, I couldn't stop him. Otherwise, I really wanted to beat him up. There's no need to say any more. Although Gong Emo was tired at this time, she was very clear that Li Ku must have sided with imperial concubine Long. Not only did he attack the crown prince, but he also betrayed the fact that she had a huge killing weapon in her hands. No wonder the emperor would give orders one after another. It wasn't that he didn't know that Gong Che was assassinated. It was very likely that the emperor knew that Gong Che was assassinated, but he still couldn't resist the temptation and wanted to get the thing in her hands. Or perhaps it was as she had guessed. Something must have happened that made him want to leave. Gong Emo closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes were filled with determination. Right now, the emperor wants the crown prince to return to the capital. However, the crown prince has been attacked by an assassin and his life is at stake. Therefore, there is no need to say anything else. I want to open the water route within a week so that brother crown prince can take a boat back to the capital. Otherwise, the crown prince will suffer the pain of the bumpy journey and die on the way. Su Yuan was in a difficult position. What should I do? I've also received a decree to return to the capital immediately. Moreover, it's impossible to open the waterway within a week. Princess, why waste your energy? Gong Emo looked at him deeply. Whether or not it's a waste of effort, you'll know in the future. Forget it, you can go back first. But the men here must stay and serve me. Su Yuan was taken aback for a moment, and then he said awkwardly, "But I've already dismissed the farmers today, and told them not to come anymore." Gong Emo frowned slightly but quickly relaxed. "It's fine. I have my own plans. You just need to give me the crown prince's transfer order and return to the capital." Su Yuan nodded. "Don't worry. After I return to the capital, I'll contact my friends to plead for you." "No need. Gong Yimo sighed. You just need to tell the emperor that the crown prince is about to die. What's the use of saying anything else? Su Yuan felt sorrowful in his heart. Recently, the successive blows had made him very angry and frustrated. Originally, he was about to achieve a meritorious service. He spent more than a year to cultivate to this point and exhausted all his efforts. But because of Li Ku's snitch, all his efforts went down the drain. The crown prince was assassinated, and the princess was in trouble. The Grand Canal that benefited the people might be stranded. And all of this was just a fight between the princes for the throne. If it was a normal day, with the emperor's character, he would definitely not tolerate this kind of thing. But Gong Yimo had something that even the emperor was jealous of, and someone used it as bait to tempt the emperor. That was why the situation was like this. Those people were too selfish, too excessive, and too vicious. It wasn't that Gong Yimo wasn't angry, but what was the use? After bidding farewell to Su Yuan, she didn't rest. Instead, she ran all the way to the section of the canal that was being repaired. Because they were digging on land, it was much faster than working in the mud. Su Yuan dug very quickly. At this rate, they could dig to the capital in a month. Gong Yimo stood at the end of the construction and looked north. In front of her was a piece of land that had already been cleared. It extended into the distance. As long as they dug along this river and connected it to the Longting River, it would be enough. It was just that simple. Her ghostly figure went all the way north. From time to time, she would stop to bury something and then continue forward. She did this repeatedly and almost didn't sleep for the whole night. The next day, the people in the towns and villages around Hingshui were awakened by a series of explosions. Bang! 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 The sound was earth-shattering, and it seemed that the house was shaking. The sky was just beginning to brighten. There was no rain or thunder, but the sound was like a series of continuous thunders. What in the world had happened? Was it the mountain god's anger? Or was it an earth dragon turning over? The people in the nearby villages were frightened by the earth-shattering explosion. They gathered at the entrance of the village and knelt in the direction of the explosion. As for the farmers who had been dismissed, when they heard that the explosion came from the river that was being repaired, they hurriedly carried their hoes and ran over. Soon, many people gathered in that direction. Was the heavens angry? Was that sound just now a thunderclap? There were also many timid people who hurriedly packed their bags and ran in the opposite direction. They were afraid that if they were a little slower, they would suffer the wrath of God. However, when the explosion stopped, and many people carefully approached, they saw smoke and dust filling the sky. There was a smell of urine everywhere. That kind of movement just now, could it be that someone was setting off fireworks? When the smoke and dust gradually dispersed, many people exclaimed. Because the place where they dug the canal yesterday had a road blown up all the way to the north. It had really blasted a path out. One after another, the earth pits were connected, revealing that the earth-shattering feeling just now was not a dream. There really was an unimaginable force that smashed into the ground. Not only did it blow up a big hole, it even loosened the surrounding rocks. It was as if God had sent down divine thunder to repair the canal for them. God has built the canal. God has shown his power. The people who had gathered all knelt down and shouted non-stop. God has built the canal. God has shown his power. Their voices were very loud, and it attracted many of the surrounding residents who were originally terrified. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were all shocked. Towards the unknown mysterious force, they were convinced from the bottom of their hearts. They were devout and fearful, but at the same time, grateful and kowtowing. God had built the canal. This proved that this canal was approved by God. Maybe God had purposely sent it to the crown prince in a dream. That was why the crown prince had come to repair the canal, because all of this was God's will. Soon, there were 70 to 80,000 people kneeling by the riverbank, and it was obvious that the number was increasing. Since God had sent down a revelation, how could they, as mortals, go against it? Even the local officials and merchants received the news and hurried over. Seeing such a shocking scene, the parents and officials of Heng Shui knelt down, not daring to be disrespectful. Chapter 93. At this time, the smoke and dust had completely dissipated. Just now, everyone had only taken a glance and didn't dare to look up. Only now did they discover that there was a girl sitting on a huge rock across from them. She was using a sword to support herself on the rock, her head resting on the sword. She seemed to be in a deep sleep. Just now, the deafening shouts hadn't been able to wake her up. She had suddenly appeared in front of the world like a miracle. That kind of mystery made people feel afraid. More and more people arrived, and the sun gradually rose. The local governor seemed to feel that he had seen this girl before, but because of the shock of the scene in front of him, his legs were still trembling. He couldn't stand up for a long time. The moment the first ray of sunlight crossed the horizon and shone on her body, the fairy-like girl's eyelashes moved. No one dared to breathe loudly. They just quietly and carefully knelt on the ground, as if afraid of waking her up. Finally, Gong Yimo opened her eyes. Seeing so many people in front of her, she didn't seem surprised at all. Her calm eyes swept over them. She had a rough idea of how many people there were. At this time, she took out a gold medallion from her bosom. It was the Crown Prince's transfer order that Su Yuan had given her. From today onwards, the officials and people of Hengshui would be at her disposal. Many people looked at the medallion in her hand in a daze. Wasn't that the Crown Prince's transfer order? Shouldn't it be in the hands of Supervisor Su? Why was it in the hands of this little girl? Have you all heard of this saying? Gong Yimo opened her mouth. Because she used her internal energy to speak, her voice wasn't loud. However, every word seemed to ring in their ears, so that everyone could hear it clearly. The migrant workers were still in a daze. They weren't sure if this strange and mysterious girl was an immortal from the heavens. Some people came back to their senses. Just as they were thinking hard about what the other party was referring to, the other party spoke again. Gong Yimo curled her lips into a smile. That kind of mocking evil and disdainful expression appeared on the face of a teenage girl. It made the strange feeling even more intense. Those who cultivate the canal will benefit the world. Her words caused everyone present to come back to their senses. There was no other reason. They weren't far from the capital, so some words couldn't be said casually. A few days ago, someone had been beaten 40 times by Supervisor Su because of this. Supervisor Su also said that anyone who talked about this matter would be sacrificed to the canal. Therefore, no one in Heng Shui dared to say anything. But even if they didn't dare to say it out loud, it didn't mean that they didn't talk about it in private. So when Gong Yimo said it, they had such a big reaction. It could be seen that the more they tried to suppress it, the more intense it would be in private. Gong Yimo stood up and stood on top of the stone, looking down at the crowd. Those who build the canal will bring glory to the world. She laughed heartily. Several days ago, the heavens allowed the Crown Prince to dig out this cauldron. It was an auspicious omen, it was the will of the heavens. The heavens are using the Crown Prince to praise the Emperor, to build the canal and bring glory to the world. It's a pity. Gong Yimo sighed. It's a pity that the Crown Prince was slandered because of this. They said that the cauldron was the Crown Prince's intention to disobey the Emperor. Now that the Crown Prince was assassinated and his life was at stake, His Majesty urgently summoned him back to the capital. The Crown Prince couldn't stand the bumpy journey due to his injuries, so he delayed his departure and was charged with the crime of disobeying the Emperor. The canal that was only a month away from completion was delayed because of this, causing the heavens to be furious. Gong Yimo pointed at the hole in the ground and laughed. So the heavens sent down a bolt of lightning to build the canal. This is the best indication. The Crown Prince is innocent. The canal must be completed. The Crown Prince can't travel by land due to his injuries and can only travel by water. So at dawn this morning, the heavens sent down a bolt of lightning to open the way. This is the will of the heavens. Not only does it help us mortals, but it also hopes that the Crown Prince can return to the capital as soon as possible to clear his name. Now that the heavens have opened the way, I am here on the Crown Prince's orders for you to continue digging. Use 7 days to open the canal. Are you willing to comply with the will of the heavens? Her words rang clearly in everyone's ears. On one hand, the Crown Prince was wronged, and on the other, in the name of the heavens, the people were afraid and indignant. The Crown Prince wholeheartedly served the people, but he was wronged. Now that he was in danger, there was no way to return. Even the heavens couldn't stand by and watch, so they sent down a bolt of lightning to open the way. How could they dare to refuse? They all banged their heads on the ground and shouted their willingness. The local governor was a just and honest person. He admired the Crown Prince for being able to do such a grand undertaking of digging the canal, and he was ignited by the people's passion and shouted loudly. Governor Pu Yuchang of Hingshui will use the entire city's strength to open the canal in 7 days. Welcome the Crown Prince back to the capital. Welcome the Crown Prince back to the capital. Gong Yimo smiled. The wind blew her hair, and her clean, almost transparent skin glowed with holy light under the morning sun. She lifted her skirt and knelt on one knee, facing the heavens and saying piously, "All participants will be blessed by the heavens and be safe for all eternity." After she finished speaking, she waved her small hand toward the sky and faced the people, her expression firm and persistent. "So it is. Let's go." Following her command, everyone started to move. Many of them brought hoes and hurried to work, while those who didn't bring anything went home to prepare. Some pushed carts, some pulled plows, some herded cows, and some herded horses. The construction site was bustling again, but unlike the usual task-like work, they worked especially hard this time. This was an instruction from the heavens. Gong Yimo personally received the local governor, Pu Yuchang, and bowed deeply to express her gratitude. Governor Pu is benevolent and righteous. This little girl is very grateful. Pu Yuchang didn't dare to accept her bow and hurriedly helped her up. He finally remembered who the person in front of him was. She was the once famous Chaoyang princess. He sighed in his heart, but said, "Opening the canal is a good thing for the country and the people. Although I'm a small governor, I'm willing to do my part for the country." Gong Yimo nodded. Although she was very tired, she was very grateful. "Thank you. It's just that I'm pressed for time and can't sit down to drink and talk with you. I'm going to bring the Crown Prince back to the capital now. I hope that the governor can look after him for me." "Definitely." The two looked at each other and smiled, becoming good friends despite the difference in age. And this matter spread to the capital in an instant. Emperor Gong smashed several memorials. Rebellion, rebellion. Are they trying to rebel? What mandate from the heavens, what will of the heavens? Zhen is the will of the heavens. Changshi lowered his head and stood at the side, persuading in a low voice, "Your Majesty, please calm down." Perhaps she instructed her subordinates to spread false rumors. Emperor Gong was so angry that he laughed. What miracle, the heavens building the canal, it's all Gong Yimo's doing, right? That thing in her hand is indeed extraordinary. With her intelligence, how could she not guess why Jin wants the crown prince to return to the capital? But it's fine if she doesn't hand it over, but now she's going to great lengths to continue building the canal. Could it be that she wants to rebel? She keeps saying that the crown prince is wronged, or is she building momentum for the crown prince? Chapter 94. The more Gong Qing thought about it, the more uneasy he became. If Gong Yimo still had a large number of such weapons in her hands, it was not impossible for her to directly attack the palace and force him to abdicate. Perhaps she had already reached an agreement with Gong Che to force him to abdicate. Then does your majesty want to stop the governor of Hengshui from continuing to dig? No need. Gong Qing waved his hand coldly. Since he wanted to repair it, then let it be. After all, it was a good thing that it was completed. However, Gong Yimo wanted to wait for the canal to be completed so that the crown prince could take a boat back to the capital. He wanted to see how injured he was. He wanted to take a boat back to the capital. Changshi, I order you to personally deliver the imperial edict and bring the crown prince back immediately. Presumably, as long as the crown prince returned, Gong Yimo would definitely come back with him. As Gong Qing spoke, he threw an urgent report to Changshi with a cold smile. Presumably, Gong Yimo is now running between the two places and still doesn't know about the West Province. Give this to her. Changshi accepted the order and immediately left. As the number one expert in the palace, Gong Yimo was definitely not his opponent. On the other side, after asking the governor to supervise the digging of the last section of the canal for her, Gong Yimo only took a sip of water and then set off again. Only this time, she was relaxed. She had arranged the most important matter and only needed to think about returning to the capital. As for the crown prince, there should not be a big problem with Assistant Minister Liu and the others taking care of him. Perhaps the crown prince would have already survived and woke up by the time she returned. Thinking about how Gong Che was inexplicably injured and almost died, Gong Yimo felt very guilty. She was too careless. When she returned to the capital, she would definitely teach those people who were behind her a lesson. The more she thought about it, the more sleepy she became. Fortunately, Governor Pu arranged a boat for her to go straight down to the Huai River so that she could rest. The corner of Gong Yimo's mouth couldn't help but reveal a smile. It was because of these people who helped her that she was able to overcome difficulties again and again. Gong Yimo had used Qinggong the entire time, traveling day and night, but it still took her more than 2 days. On the way back, Pu Yuchang saw that she was extremely tired, so he kindly arranged a small boat for her. She slept on the boat for a few hours, and then carefully thought about it. On the 3rd day, she rushed back to the Huai River. The atmosphere on the street was clearly different. Perhaps it was because of the assassination attempt on the crown prince, or perhaps it was because of the 2 imperial edicts. In short, everyone was in danger. Gong Yimo didn't have time to care about others and hurried to the crown prince's residence, but she didn't expect that she would end up with nothing. Where is he? Where did everyone go? Her eyes were red as she looked around. Dr. Su. Secretary Li. He wasn't here. None of them were here. At this moment, one of the guards rushed up to Gong Yimo and knelt down. Princess. It's our incompetence. The crown prince has been sent away. Gong Yimo felt her heart tremble. She reached out and grabbed him by the collar. This was the first time she had questioned him with such a terrifying expression. What did you say? Where is Assistant Minister Liu? Didn't he say that he would guard the crown prince? The man was so scared that his face turned pale. His whole body was trembling as he stammered. After you left, everything was peaceful. Who knew that after a few days, Assistant Minister Liu, who was guarding the crown prince every day, was killed by Gong Gong. Gong Gong also instigated the others and took the crown prince away yesterday. Gong Gong. Gong Yimo couldn't help but recall the counselor who had been standing behind Assistant Minister Liu. It turned out to be him. He killed Assistant Minister Liu. Gong Yimo wanted to vomit blood. She just wanted to rest for a while, so she took the waterway. She trusted those people so much. But she didn't want them to betray her as soon as she left. What about the Imperial Guards? Aren't the Imperial Guards guarding the Crown Prince? The man was almost crying from Gong Yimo's yelling. He said in a low voice, Commander Zhao didn't want to at first, but all the officials had decided. He didn't dare to go against the edict alone, so he acquiesced to the decision and escorted the Crown Prince and the officials to the north. Gong Emo felt a chill in her heart. In the past, she had drunk wine with Commander Zhao and the others. These people were all men of steel, and they were all friends. Just because Gong Gong killed one person, they all went against their oath and betrayed the Crown Prince. Just because they were afraid of the Emperor and were afraid of going against the edict, they refused to believe her for once. To think that she trusted them so much, to think that they were the Crown Prince's close officials. Gong Yimo felt that the world was spinning. Her body swayed, and she let go of the person in her hand. She quickly calmed herself down. Don't worry, things haven't reached the point of no return. Even if Gong Gong, who took the Crown Prince away, had bad intentions, he didn't dare to take the Crown Prince's life at this time. He must have brought the Crown Prince back to take credit. He just left yesterday, so he certainly hasn't gone far. It's just that Gong Che's life was in danger. If something went wrong, he may die on the road, so she must be faster. Gong Yimo didn't say a word, she chased after them by land. At this time, her eyes were bloodshot. She couldn't see the usual luster. Finally, in the evening, she stopped the group of Imperial Guards. Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect Gong Yimo to be so fast. Imperial Dr. Su, Imperial Dr. Su. Commander Li. Gong Gong. Every time Gong Emo called out a person's name, that person trembled, his legs trembled, and he almost fell to his knees. There was no other reason, because Gong Yimo's appearance at this time was too scary. Her white clothes were stained with a lot of unknown stains, and the corners of her clothes were torn. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. She lowered her head and stared at them with bloodshot eyes. She was smiling and calling their names one by one. A team of more than 2,000 people faced a little girl, but they couldn't even raise a trace of momentum. Finally, when a hidden sword slipped out of her sleeve, Gong Gong was the first to kneel on the ground. He looked frightened and his face was pale. Where is the Crown Prince? As soon as she finished speaking, Imperial Dr. Su quickly said, the Crown Prince is in the carriage. We have several layers of bedding, before he could finish his words, Gong Yimo had already flown into the carriage. At this time, Gong Gong seemed to have recovered. He secretly scolded himself for being useless and quickly ordered the guards to take down Gong Yimo. These 2,000 people were originally ordered by the Emperor to protect the Crown Prince. If they were asked to violate their beliefs and follow the Emperor's order to take the Crown Prince back to the palace, they reluctantly agreed. At that time, when they were asked to take down Gong Yimo, who was like a good friend in the past, Commander Zhao was the first to refuse. Unlike the officials, these people were more simple. They also appreciated Gong Yimo very much. They looked down on Gong Gong's actions, just because they were weak and they were directly under the Emperor. They could only obey his orders. It doesn't mean that they won't resist. Commander Zhao snorted and ignored it. Gong Gong's beard was about to stand up. Bold. I was ordered by His Majesty to send the Crown Prince back to the capital. You are the Imperial Guards, but you don't listen to my orders. As his voice fell, the curtain of the carriage was suddenly shaken open by Gong Yimo's internal force, revealing the panoramic view inside the carriage. Chapter 95. A few girls screamed. Gong Yimo appeared in front of everyone holding Gong Che, whose face was as pale as a ghost. The two maids who took care of Gong Che fell down the moment the carriage exploded. They quickly knelt on the ground and didn't dare to move. Gong Yimo raised her eyes and covered Gong Che's heart with one hand. Then, she coldly glanced at Gong Gong and others. This glance made Gong Gong no longer dare to clamor. He hid behind the guard commander and didn't dare to face Gong Yimo's eyes. Gong Yimo laughed. It's just that her laughter was filled with endless exhaustion and disappointment. Why? At the beginning, you all swore to me that you will wait for me and protect the crown prince. But when I left, you all betrayed me. Just because he killed someone and coerced you. When Gong Yimo pointed at him, Gong Gong's face turned pale. His legs trembled and he almost knelt down. Imperial Dr. Su was ashamed when he heard this. He knelt down in front of Gong Yimo. It's this old man's fault. Rather than being coerced by Gong Gong, it's better to say that this old man really didn't dare to continue to resist the imperial edict. After all, I still have a wife and daughter at home. I have to. As soon as he finished speaking, many people nodded their heads. Secretary Li's face was full of sorrow. We were really forced. Our relatives are in the capital. If we angered His Majesty, how can they survive? Gong Yimo laughed. So, you dare to bring the crown prince back regardless of his life and death? If the crown prince really dies, can your family escape responsibility? I don't know what Gong Gong promised you that you dare to take such a risk. After speaking, she slightly raised her head and closed her eyes. Her voice suddenly became low. She sighed in the wind. I trusted you so much. Why can't you believe me once? Now, Hingshui works day and night. It will only take a few days to get through the Longting River. As long as we take the waterway, we can return to the capital in a few days. I did it. What about you? What about you? Her words made everyone surprised and ashamed. They didn't dare to look up. But they didn't dare to gamble. Naturally, after Gong Gong had killed Assistant Minister Lu, who had been the most persistent, they had wavered. They had been persuaded by Gong Gong with just a few words and had done as Gong Gong said. Thinking about it now, it was too late for regret. On the other hand, Gong Yimo's subordinates were pouring their inner energy into Gong Che with all their might. Only when their inner energy was almost depleted did Gong Che's originally pale face regain some vitality. Her heart relaxed, but at this time, Gong Gong suddenly pushed the leader of the guards, Commander Zhao. Then, he took out an imperial edict. Commander Zhao. The imperial edict is here. I order you to capture Gong Yimo as soon as possible. Do you dare to defy the imperial decree? Commander Zhao was so angry that his face paled. He had long disliked this Duke Gong. Not only was he a traitor, he even wanted him to deal with the princess. He raised his head and said, My duty is to protect the crown prince. I was ordered to escort the crown prince back to the capital, so I won't listen to your orders. You! Gong Gong was angry and afraid. He was very afraid that Gong Yimo would suddenly explode and kill him. His small eyes almost popped out of their sockets. When the exhausted Gong Yimo heard Commander Zhao's words, her heart warmed slightly. She knew that as long as she caught up, Commander Zhao would definitely stand on her side. He just couldn't disobey the imperial order. Now, as long as they agreed to return to the capital by boat, everything would be fine. It's fine to not listen to his orders, but what about me? A slightly shrill voice sounded. The white-haired Chang Shik appeared in front of everyone like a ghost. He was still holding the imperial edict in his hand. His sharp eyes shot straight at Gong Yimo. Everyone, receive the imperial edict. Everyone, including the imperial guards, knelt down, but Gong Yimo didn't have any intention of coming down. She just looked at him very coldly. Changshi waited for a moment and couldn't help but sigh. He opened the imperial edict and read it out. By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees that Crown Prince Che has repeatedly disobeyed the imperial edict. From today onwards, he will be temporarily stripped of his position as a prince and his authority over the imperial guards. He will be taken back to the capital and will immediately depart without delay. By the imperial edict. After he finished reading, he sighed again. The crown prince still hasn't received the imperial edict? Gong Yimo suddenly smiled and said, Brother Crown Prince only has one breath left. I'm afraid he can't receive the imperial edict. Her words made Gong Che's face pale. Changshi was slightly stunned. Seeing that Gong Che's pale face didn't seem to be fake, he frowned and said, How can it be so serious? Otherwise. Gong Yimo was still smiling. I don't know what the rumors are in the capital. The crown prince's reputation is so high that he can shake the emperor. Or is it that the crown prince wants to force the abdication and deliberately disobeyed the imperial edict and refused to return to the capital? Changshi walked forward a few steps and found that the crown prince was indeed very weak. Just as Gong Yimo said, he only had one breath left. He cursed silently in his heart. The capital was now a pool of muddy water. Who knew how many people had a hand in this matter, but no one believed a word. Eunuch Changshi. Gong Yimo gently called out to him, just like in the imperial palace. Brother Crown Prince's life is at stake. I want to take him back to the capital by water. I hope Eunuch will permit it. Although Gong Yimo didn't lower her head, Changshi still couldn't bear the pleading between the lines. However, he was still loyal to the emperor. Thinking of the emperor's request, he cruelly shook his head. Gong Yimo gently bit her lower lip and said unwillingly, I promise that when the boat reaches Hingshui, the canal will have been completely opened. It definitely won't delay Eunuch's journey. Eunuch, can't you make an exception this once? Changshi thought of the news he received about Hingshui a few days ago. Heaven had built the canal, causing the emperor to be furious. If Gong Yimo really took the crown prince back on the boat, the emperor would probably be even angrier. So Changshi shook his head again. Princess, please don't make things difficult for me. Let me take the crown prince first. Princess, don't worry. With my internal energy protecting me along the way, nothing will happen to the crown prince. Ha, 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 his resolute attitude and words made Gong Yimo laugh. She laughed until she couldn't hold back her anger. How interesting. Even if Changshi were to escort Gong Che all the way back to the capital with his life hanging on by a thread, if he were to return to the capital in this state, he would be a sinner. He might even be accused of treason by those princes who were eyeing him covetously. What was the difference between dying and not dying? At that time, don't talk about building the canal and becoming famous all over the world. Not only would there be no merit, but he would also die with infamy. And she, Gong Yimo, had worked so hard for so long. Gong Che had worked so hard for so long. It wasn't for them to waste all their previous efforts. Seeing that Gong Yimo didn't move, Changshi frowned slightly. Princess, don't tell me you want to defy the edict for the third time. Gong Yimo secretly held her hidden blade in one hand. She raised her head and laughed, why not? Changshi shook his head slightly. At this time, the wind rustled through the trees, mixing with his sigh. Don't tell me princess, don't care about the life and death of His Highness the Ninth Prince. Gong Yimo's expression changed slightly. What does this have to do with Gong Dai? Changshi handed an urgent report to Gong Yimo. She immediately took it and skimmed through it. The more she read, the more shocked she was. It turned out that Gong Dai, he actually didn't listen to her and Jinshi of Gojoseon's advice and brought people to infiltrate Lu Yi to investigate. Chapter 96. Why did he do this? Why? He did not stop there. It turned out that Lu Yi really did make a move, but it was seen through by Gong Dai. Gong Dai killed the guards by himself, burned the provisions, and turned a sneak attack into nothing. But Lu Ye's army arrived in advance, and Gong Dai was chased all the way. In the end, Lu Ye's army forced into the barren miasma plain and never appeared again. Chang Shi saw Gong Yimo's frightened expression and timely said, "The barren miasma plain is a natural barrier between the two countries. It is also a place of death. His Highness has been lost in it for 7 or 8 days. His Majesty's meaning is very clear. If Princess can hand over that thing, His Majesty will immediately send the most elite light cavalry to rescue His Highness. If not," Gong Yimo's knuckles turned white. She squeezed the urgent report and forced a smile. If not. Princess can only pray that His Highness is lucky. Ha 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 ha. Gong Yimo could not help but laugh. She raised the urgent report and her eyes were filled with disbelief. Did I hear wrongly? Gong Dai made such a miraculous contribution. Instead of saving him, you use him to threaten me. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. Presumably, Emperor Gong heard Li Ku exaggerating the power of the barren miasma plain and saw that Lu Yi was about to make a move. He wanted to use the barren miasma plain to show the country's prestige. In addition, there were people fanning the flames to make Emperor Gong afraid that she and the Crown Prince really had the intention to rebel, so he came up with such a vicious move. It was really interesting. Chang Shi was silent for a long time and said softly, "Princess, why do you have to do this? If you insist on resisting the imperial edict, perhaps when His Highness returns to the capital, His Majesty will be angry and suspicious. He will really punish His Highness with the sentence, 'The man who built the barren miasma plain.' Is this what you want to see?" At this time, Gong Che's head was pillowed on her lap. It was unknown whether he was alive or dead, but the Emperor used his 2 sons' lives to threaten her, an outsider. It was really interesting. Gong Yimo could not help but reach out to touch Gong Che's frighteningly white face. Why should I sacrifice so much for the imperial family? It was like this in the previous life, and it would be the same in this life. Do you really think I can't be ruthless? Wasn't it Gong Dai? Wasn't it Gong Che? What does that have to do with me? So what? But suddenly, Gong Yimo spat out a mouthful of blood. Her actions really gave Chang Shi a fright. Even the people kneeling around her were shocked. He panicked. Gong Yimo vomited blood. She was actually forced to vomit blood. She raised her bloodshot eyes and looked at Chang Shi. That look made Chang Shi involuntarily take a step back. She smiled and casually wiped the blood from her lips with the back of her hand. Isn't it just death? The Emperor doesn't care, but I do. But when she said that, she actually spat out another mouthful of blood. After spitting out 2 mouthfuls of blood, her entire little face turned golden white. But she was still smiling, revealing a mouthful of blood-stained teeth. She thought of Gong Dai, who was far away in the West Continent, whose fate was unknown. That was the child she had raised single-handedly. How could she not care? She then thought of Gong Che. She had done so much for him, all so that he would be a kind and good emperor in the future. She also really treated him as a good brother. How could she not care? So even though she had lived 3 lives, she was still so useless. She would rather die than hand over the Lei Lei. Was she going to watch them die? Gong Yimo opened her mouth and wanted to laugh, but she spat out another mouthful of blood. Princess. Just when Changshi was stunned and did not know how to react, Commander Zhao could not stand it anymore. The moment Gong Yimo fell, he flew onto the carriage and hugged her tightly. He raised his head and glared at Changshi. It was the first time he dared to look at the first person by the emperor's side with such a gaze. Eunuch Changshi. I can't stand it anymore. How old is the princess? Your approach is really despicable. Over the past year, how many things has the princess done for the people of Dayu State? We have all seen it with our own eyes. Along the way, there are no people who don't like the princess and don't remember her kindness. We admire her very much. Today, if Eunuch really wants to do it, even if I lose my life, I will do it according to the princess's wishes. We will return to the capital by boat. Changshi had already panicked when he saw Gong Yimo vomiting blood. At this time, the 2,000 imperial guards all knelt down. We swear to serve the princess. Eunuch Gong was shocked when he saw this scene. That was the first person by the emperor's side. You. Are you all crazy? At this time, Imperial Dr. Su and others also sighed and knelt down. We are also willing to return to the capital by boat. We have already stopped believing in her once, so we can't stop believing in her a second time. Since the princess guarantees that the waterway can be passed, then we are all willing to believe in her once. Everyone knelt down. Only Changshi and Eunuch Gong were standing. Eunuch Gong was stared at by Commander Zhao with a murderous look, but he also knelt down with a plop. A girl, who was deprived of her identity as a princess and was only 13 years old, what kind of charm does she have that can make so many people submit to her? And they are willing to listen to her orders. Changshi couldn't help but take a look at Gong Yimo. At this time, her small face was pale and she was in a mess. But when he remembered that she often naughtily pulled the horsetail whisk in his hand, he couldn't bear it. For the first time, he disobeyed the emperor's will and agreed. So the group of people went back home. Changshi wrote a letter and ordered people to rush back to the capital, explaining the reason why the crown prince was in danger and must take a boat. On the way back to the Huai River, Commander Zhao rode his horse and guarded the carriage without saying a word. His eyes flashed with a strange light, as if he was thinking about something. Just now, when he had caught the princess, she had written a sentence in his hand, one stroke at a time, tens of thousands of people pulling silk into the capital. Find Wu Heng. Commander Zhao knew Wu Heng, but that person was very inconspicuous. It was said that he was working for the princess, but he didn't know what he was doing. Tens of thousands of people pulling silk. Do they have such a big boat? And why did the princess do that? At this time, she and the crown prince were already at the cusp of the storm. What's the benefit of returning to the capital in such a high-profile way? On the way back, Commander Zhao told Deputy Commander Zhou Qi about this matter. Zhou Qi was a dark-skinned man. He rubbed his chin and said, "Why don't I go ahead and ask Wu Heng about the situation? That's the only way." Commander Zhao patted his shoulder and sighed. I only hope that the princess can get through this. I'm counting on you. When he thought of that little girl who was so angry that she vomited blood, Commander Zhao's face was full of unbearable resentment. Although they didn't know the reason, what kind of man was he to force a girl like this? Commander Zhou accepted the order and immediately rushed to the Huai River ahead of the carriage. Changshi glanced at him but didn't stop him. When they reached the Huai River, Commander Zhou didn't dare to delay for a moment and went directly to Wu Heng's residence. It was already dawn, but he hadn't gotten up yet. When he heard that the Imperial Guards were looking for him, his heart trembled and he quickly got up. What orders does Commander Zhou have? Chapter 97. Wu Heng knew this commander. The princess was also very good to them and had become close friends with him. Therefore, Wu Heng had met this commander several times. The other party did not have time to talk nonsense with him. Wu Heng. I'm here on the princess's orders. The princess said that she wanted thousands of people to tow the ship and asked us to look for you. You have to give us an explanation. Wu Heng was puzzled. Didn't she say that she had to wait until winter? Commander Zhou was even more puzzled. Why wait until winter? Wu Heng looked him up and down before he smiled and said, originally, the princess had prepared a huge ship and wanted to present it to your majesty during your majesty's birthday in winter. He could not help but frown. It was not that he had not heard of the turmoil during this period, but as the ship's steward, he could not interfere. He could only worry helplessly. A huge ship. Zhou Qi repeated. What kind of ship can be called a huge ship? Then, he slapped the back of his head. That ship must be very big. The princess must be talking about this ship. Quick, take me to see it. Wu Heng was a little confused. Where is the princess going with the ship now? As he spoke, he hurriedly put on his clothes. Zhou Qi said in a muffled voice, back to the capital of course. As he spoke, he looked back at him suspiciously. Since it's a huge ship, how many people can it hold? He calculated in his heart. It would be great if it could hold 300 people. Other than the important people, some of the imperial guards would be able to protect them. The rest would take the small boats. Wu Heng followed him out and asked in a daze, didn't they say that they were leaving the capital? Including the imperial guards, there should only be about 2,000 people, right? What do you mean by 2,000 people? At this moment, Wu Heng snapped out of his daze. He straightened his clothes and raised his head proudly. If there are only 2,000 people, one ship is enough. This sentence caused Zhou Qi to freeze on the spot, unable to regain his senses for a long time. One ship. 2,000 people. Is this Wu Heng lying to me? When Zhou Qi saw the unbelievably huge ship, he was completely stunned. As if possessed, he wanted to touch the shining armor of the ship. However, because of the lake, he could only look and sigh. This is the princess's ship. Zhou Qi quickly denied himself. How is that possible? The princess had only been building the canal for a year and a half. It was impossible for her to build such a boat. Could it be that he can predict the future? Although he had seen it countless times, Wu Heng was the same as Zhou Qi. Every time, he would exclaim from the bottom of his heart, it would be impossible to build such a ship with the current technology, but the princess has proposed a method that not only increases the safety of the ship, but also increases its balance and capacity. But the craftsmanship is only 2/3 of what it used to be. How is this possible? Princess. How did she do it? Watertight compartment. Wu Heng pointed at the hull of the ship and smiled. This ship can hold more than 2,000 people. Because not only can it carry people on board, it also has cabins below the ship. The watertight compartment, if one had to put it simply, was to separate the originally solid cabin section by section. This way, not only would it reduce the weight and increase the buoyancy, it would also greatly increase the safety. For example, if one or two cabins were damaged, the ship would not sink. He explained it to Zhou Qi and Zhou Qi said, amazing. It's amazing. If this method is used in the Navy, no one in Daiyu State's warships will be able to defeat them. However, the most important thing now was for the princess and the crown prince to survive this disaster. Zhou Qi thought of Gong Yimo's pale face in a coma and couldn't help but sigh. He then told Wu Heng about the current situation. When Wu Heng heard this, he was so angry that he screamed. Preposterous! How preposterous! He wasn't tall, so he jumped on the spot and cursed. Is the princess's contribution not enough? How dare they use His Highness to threaten the princess to hand over something? This is the biggest joke in the world. Zhou sighed. You can't blame His Majesty for this. His Majesty must be very upset that the bronze cauldron was dug out. In addition, there were people fanning the flames, so His Majesty is like this. When eunuch Changshi saw that the crown prince was in danger, he was very shocked. It seems that His Majesty doesn't know about this. If he knew, he wouldn't be like this. As for what the princess has, it must be very important. But no matter how important it was, he shouldn't force a child like this. He couldn't explain further. He didn't read the secret report, so he simply thought that the princess vomited blood in anger because His Highness was threatened and the emperor temporarily took back the crown prince's authority. But things weren't that simple. When Lu Yi came to invade, Gong Qing also wanted to get the thing in Gong Yimo's hands to give Lu Yi a crushing lesson. But Gong Yimo made it clear that she wasn't willing to give it to him. In addition to the bronze cauldron incident and the people around him fanning the flames, Gong Qing was so anxious to get the treasure. He thought that the more Gong Yimo refused to give it to him, the more suspicious it was. It confirmed the guesses of the people around him that she was plotting rebellion. That was why he was so anxious. And all of this led to the current situation. The person behind the scenes must be very proud of himself. He took advantage of the emperor's suspicion. The crown prince worked hard for more than a year for the people, but now he was assassinated to seize power. The princess was also so angry that she vomited blood. The ninth prince's life was unknown, and the Grand Canal was put aside. Who knew who would benefit in the future? How shrewd! What a good plan! With such a brain, why use it to harm people and seize other people's political achievements? The more Wu Hing thought about it, the angrier he became. You said that the princess wants thousands of people to pull the ship. Yes. This was also what Zhou Qi couldn't figure out. His Majesty suspected that the crown prince was disloyal, so why did the princess want to be so high profile? Wu Hing touched his chin. Every scale on this giant ship can be turned over. There are small holes on it, specially designed for pulling the ship. But back then, the princess designed it so that during His Majesty's birthday, tens of thousands of people would pull the ship back to the capital and present it to the emperor. Now that the plan has been brought forward, I don't know why, Zhou Qi also couldn't figure it out. It's probably because the ship is more stable and beneficial for the crown prince's recovery. Wu Hing felt that this reason was definitely not the whole reason, but since he couldn't figure it out, he decided not to think about it. He clapped his hands and said, "Don't worry about it. We can't care about that anymore. You said that eunuch Changshi will be arriving with his men this afternoon. Then, we have to make our move now. Find the people to pull the ship." Zhou Qi looked at the giant ship and sighed. Is it because the ship doesn't have enough power, so you need people to pull the ship? Wu Heng smiled slyly. It's the opposite. This ship is originally very light, and the ship has a very labor-saving propeller design. The two sides of the ship have also been modified. To drive such a ship, only 40 people are enough, but the lack of power can be the reason why we need people to pull the ship. Chapter 98. Although it wasn't the time to be amazed, Zhou Qi still couldn't help but praise the ingenuity of this ship. Looking at the design of the 5 sails that were obviously different from other ships, the armor that could be turned over, and the internal workmanship. It wasn't hard to imagine how much effort the princess had put into this ship. Originally, the princess wanted to have thousands of people pull the cable and give this ship to the emperor for his birthday. Her filial piety moved heaven and earth. Who knew what the emperor's expression would be when he found out? Without further ado, they split into 2 groups. Wu Hing spent money to hire people to motivate people and recruit people. Zhou Qi went to find the local governor. The governor of the Huai River was actually most grateful to Gong Yimo because in her plan, the Huai River would be a transit point between the north and the south in the future. One could imagine how rich the banks of the Huai River would be in the future. So when he heard Zhou Qi's request, he knew it was the princess's idea. He risked offending the emperor and hurriedly ordered people to beat drums and gongs to spread the news. The crown prince is dying, but he was removed from his post and rushed to the capital to receive his punishment. Is there any justice in this world? After receiving the money, coupled with the anger in their hearts and the tacit approval of the local governor, the storyteller spared no effort. The poor princess was angered to the point of vomiting blood by the little people in the capital, but she still cares about the crown prince's body. Now, the princess promised that the waterway would be clear by the time she reached Hingshui, but she was afraid that the ship would be too slow and couldn't make it back in time, so she wanted to hire people to pull the cable. We are people who have received her favor and are willing to help the princess. The princess's virtue can be felt by the sun and the moon. Now that she has been harmed by villains, we commoners also want to seek justice for her. I, Lu Qin, will be the first to participate. I must escort the princess back to the capital safely. We swear to send the princess back to the capital. What they didn't expect was that the students' enthusiasm was even more intense than theirs. They didn't go to school today. Not only did they sign up to pull the cable, but they also went out to help Zhou Qi persuade the people. The princess is a great benefactor to us students. Her heart for the country and the people is not inferior to any husband. We are willing to escort the princess back to the capital. All the students of the Huai River will not be absent. The crown prince and princess have done so many good things, but they didn't get the reward they deserved. Now that the canal has been delayed because of those villains fighting for power, it's clear who's good and who's bad. No matter who builds the canal in the future, this old man will only recognize the crown prince's credit. We will send the princess back to the capital together. Let's clear the crown prince. They don't to be disloyal. They are good people. In the morning, the people in the city seemed to have gone crazy. Students and commoners paraded through the streets. Even many commoners and women signed up to help this female hero. Soon, more and more people gathered at the entrance of the market. Zhou Qi was stunned. He did not expect the princess to have such charisma. Wu Heng was overjoyed. His shrewd eyes immediately locked onto those students. They were scholars with the highest status. Perhaps when they reached the capital, they could even help the princess. Therefore, he bowed again and again. Looking at the emotional crowd, he spoke sincerely. I didn't expect the people of Huai River to be so righteous. Today, the crown prince and princess have been wronged and must immediately return to the capital. I thank everyone for being able to stand here, but I hope to select people with reputation and ability to go with me. This is only to be able to offer their meager strength when the emperor is angry. I hope everyone will not blame me. When many commoners heard that they might not be able to pull the princess's hair, although they felt regretful, they were not angry. They knew that only people like students, doctors, and teachers had weight in their words. A student said, "From Huai River up, we will pass through many cities. Zishu is not talented, but I am willing to go to the lower city first and persuade other students to go with us." In this way, if there were people persuading students to pull the princess's hair, then when they reached the capital, how many people would there be? When Wu Heng heard this, he was so excited that he bowed deeply. In this case, thank you for your righteousness. Students, please leave immediately. They will be here soon. The leader of the students was a white-haired teacher. He stood there openly because he sincerely believed that the crown prince was a good crown prince and was worthy of him doing this. He said loudly, "Sir, please wait a moment. Let us change our clothes and gather by the river. Pull the princess's hair for the crown prince." There were also commoners who said, "We are also willing to follow the boat and wait for orders." Wu Hing only felt a surge of righteousness in his chest that could not be suppressed. He bowed deeply again, then suddenly raised his head and pointed in a direction. "In 2 hours, I will be at the Huai River Pier to welcome all of you." Therefore, when Chang Shi and the rest reached the Huai River, they did not have time to be shocked by the huge monster in the river. They were first shocked by the densely packed people on both sides of the river. What was even more strange was that they were all wearing formal student attire. They were wearing sky blue and white long-sleeved scholarly robes and square student hats. They were waiting there, as if to welcome them. Chang Shi was stunned, then asked the person standing at the front angrily, "What is going on? Why are there so many people gathered here?" When Wu Heng faced the #1 expert in the Imperial Palace, he was still a little afraid, but with thousands of students supporting him, he was confident. "Eunuch, please take a look." He pointed at the huge boat not far away. "This boat. It is a huge boat that the princess spent more than a year and exhausted all her efforts to build. Originally, the princess wanted to present this boat to His Majesty on his birthday, but now, since Eunuch is in a hurry to return to the capital, it has become the best means of transportation. After all, it is big and stable, the most suitable for the princess to recuperate. As for these people..." Wu Heng smiled and said, "They are all grateful for the princess's kindness. When they heard that His Majesty is in a hurry and that the boat is moving slowly, they spontaneously organized themselves and are willing to open the way for the boat." Chang Shi's mouth twitched, and his face was very ugly. In the end, he pointed at the scholars in front of him and said, "They are weak, how can they open the boat? There are also us." At this time, many migrant workers came from afar. They were all dressed in linen and looked very clean and energetic. "We are also willing to go. Open the way for the huge boat." At this time, the head of the students also bowed and said, "Although we are weak, our hearts are sincere. We hope that you will not stop us and fulfill our sincerity." When he said that, all the students bowed down. How could Chang Shi say anything? After all, these scholars were of high status. They were far from being suppressed by a eunuch like him. Thinking of the little princess who was still unconscious, Chang Shi let out a long sigh and acquiesced. Everyone's face lit up with joy. They all got into position. The boat. It was about to start. On both sides of the huge boat, there was a hemp rope dyed blue tied to each scale. There were 500 ropes on each side. They hung down on both sides of the boat and spread out like the wings of the huge boat. Some of the imperial guards stood at the front, with the students in the middle and the farmers at the back. With a command, "Move!" all the ropes were immediately taut. All the scales turned over. Under the sunlight, they shone with a dazzling cold light. It was moving. Like a huge beast. It was majestic and domineering as it drove its huge body. On both sides of the boat were the people escorting it, and behind it was the waves of the lake. It was such a clear standard. As if it represented the era. It was slowly moving forward. Chapter 99. Along the way, they passed by Tianqi, Huai, Shouyi, and finally arrived at Hengshui. Along the way, countless students joined them. They were all wearing sky blue and white scholarly robes and slowly replaced the main troops. Soon, the commoners spontaneously retreated to the back of the line. Later, the imperial guards also retreated to the back of the line. Only tens of thousands of students were left. They devoutly guarded the huge ship as it moved forward. They originally thought that although the princess had promised that the road would be cleared by the time they reached Hengshui, when it really happened, they couldn't help but sigh in admiration. How many people had to work at the same time to dig a canal that would have taken a month to this extent in 7 or 8 days? However, because there was still a lot of construction going on ahead and the road had not been completely cleared, the water level in the river was very shallow. When the huge ship reached here, it slowed down. What made Changxi incredulous was that when they passed by the banks of Hingshui, the construction team in front received the news and moved even faster. When the commoners who were repairing at the back saw the huge ship, they knew that the princess and crown prince had arrived. They all retreated to make way for the students and then respectfully knelt down. Welcome the crown prince, welcome the princess. Welcome the crown prince. Welcome the princess. This scene frightened the students. Because the sky was repairing the canal, the local governor had mobilized the entire city to repair the last section of the canal. There were so many people that the sound of kneeling down and shouting was earth-shattering. It was a grand scene that they had never seen before in their lives. Many students' eyes were moist. The rope in their hands also became heavy. They felt that they were not just pulling the cable, but upholding justice. It was because of justice that they received the recognition of so many people. It was even more so than an emperor's parade. As the ship moved forward, it became more and more strenuous. This was because the canal had just been cleared less than a day ago. The local governor had repaired it from the two ends to the middle. The progress of the soaring dragon river was still a step away. At this time, the water on their side was drawn from the river beside them. Therefore, they were really pulling the cable now. How much strength could those students have? The speed of the ship slowed down. Many commoners who had followed them all the way here rubbed their palms in anticipation. They finally had a use for them. When the farmers on both sides of the river saw this, they came over to help the students pull the cable. They were very strong. Almost as soon as they started, the pressure on the students was greatly reduced. The boat started moving again. Normally, many of the students came from wealthy families and studied sage books. Naturally, they would look down on these bumpkins. But now, when the other party's dark skin came close and the mud on his body stained their sky blue and white uniforms, they did not look down on him in the slightest. Especially when the commoners, whose hands had turned purple from the ropes, were still concerned about the inconspicuous blisters on the hands of the students. Many of the students cried, especially those who were not well off. They could not help but think of their parents. Born from the same root, drink from the same source. There is no difference between high and low. Only with a benevolent heart can there be a pattern. At this moment, they finally understood the meaning behind the words left behind by the ancient saint, as well as the deeper meaning that they would never have understood before. But just when they thought they would have to drag it all the way to the capital, one of them was riding a horse with a flag raised high in his hand. His face was filled with excitement. They ran over cheering. He shouted with a flushed face as he ran. "The water is coming! The water is coming!" The Grand Canal was now open. The Grand Canal is complete. The Grand Canal was completed. As he shouted that the water was coming, many people felt their emotions surge as they shouted as well. The water is coming. The Grand Canal is completed. The Grand Canal is completed. Amidst the cheers of the commoners and everyone's anticipation, a turbid wave with the force of thunder. It surged over. It was like 10,000 horses galloping. It was like a yellow dragon bursting its dike. It was majestic and spectacular, sacred and unchangeable. Water. It was a gift from the heavens. It was revered by all. It could not be defied. It was the most virtuous and the most heartless. But they had succeeded. The construction of the Grand Canal was not only changing the water, but also taming it. At this moment, the tiny humans seemed to be above nature. That was an incomparable sense of accomplishment. It made one feel intoxicated and addicted. As the water dragon rushed over, many students on both sides of the river could not avoid it in time. Their clothes were drenched by the rapid water flow, but they were not angry. Instead, all of them laughed loudly. Everyone on both sides of the river was celebrating. The joyous laughter and cheers could probably be heard in the capital. Someone even pointed at the river and improvised a poem. The angry water drives away the cold air, like thunder dispersing the sound. The waves are high and the wind is strong, the waves are rapid and hard to sink. Then, amidst everyone's exclamations, the huge ship was raised by the water flow again. It was like a trapped beast, struggling in the surging waterway. Everyone was aggressive as they gripped the rope tightly and looked in the direction of the capital. Continue. All the way to the north. Your Majesty. They are back. Someone trembled as he said this and quietly shrank to the side, wishing that he could disappear. He thought that the Emperor would be furious. But he did not expect that after waiting for a long time, the Emperor was surprisingly quiet. 2 days ago, Gong Qing received the news that Gong Che and Gong Yimo were returning to the capital on the huge ship. Countless commoners dug day and night for the ship to move. Finally, this morning, the Longting River in the capital was opened. The huge ship entered the capital directly. There were also countless students pulling the rope for the ship. Everywhere it went, there were countless people who responded. Such popular sentiment, such appeal, rather than saying that it made him afraid, it was more appropriate to say that it made him shocked. Gong Qing could not help but recall that when he first heard the news, the person who reported it was still carefully adding oil to the fire. But he was stunned, and only one sentence echoed in his mind. His child has really surpassed him. A complicated feeling of pride and fear drowned him. It was as if he was already old and useless, and could be replaced at any time. Now that he heard that they came back with great fanfare, his first reaction was not to be angry, but to want to laugh. This is his child, this must be that little girl's idea. At this time, the palace door opened, and a beauty dressed in palace attire leisurely stepped forward. She held a bowl of medicine in her hand, and slowly walked to the front of the Emperor like a willow branch swaying in the wind. Your Majesty, it's time to take the medicine. She tried to lift her fair wrist, but Gong Qing pushed it away with one hand. Your Majesty. I don't want to eat. That woman's beautiful eyes turned, and she removed her hand. Soon, a palace servant took the bowl of medicine and retreated. She glanced at the Emperor and smiled softly. I heard that the Crown Prince has returned to the capital. Is your Majesty worried about how to deal with the Crown Prince? When she said this, she even coughed a few times. She was really weak. Gong Cheng's eyes flashed with a trace of pity. Long hair, you don't need to worry about this. Your body is not good, so don't worry. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.